Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I detect that we have a quorum, and I will dispense with the calling of the roll for this, the 135th meeting of the Tennessee Advisory Commission on Intergovernmental Relations. We do have a very busy program today, primarily taken up by our panelists who are all present and ready to speak to us, but we have some preliminary matters. First, beginning with the approval of the minutes of our September 2015 meeting. Well, I can hardly take account. That was a quick draw. Well, it's been properly moved and seconded by just about everybody. That's right. Thank you very much. Any changes, any discussion about the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed or abstaining? The minutes of September 2015 meeting are approved. Behind tab 2, I will yield to Lanice Rourke-Patrick, our Executive Director, for some updates and commendations to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want you to join me in congratulating our research associate, Tyler Carpenter, who received his master's degree in public administration from Tennessee State University. Tyler?
There you go, Tyler.
Tyler has done a fantastic job on the Homestead research project. You'll see that tomorrow. And then we also want to invite Janet Steen up here to join us. She has reached her 5-year milestone with the state of Tennessee. And Janet has a lot more experience with that than that working for the state as a contractor. And we were able to persuade her to hire on full-time with us. She is our information systems manager, and she is the person who makes the infrastructure system work behind the scenes. She built that database and keeps it going for us. Her work for us has just been invaluable.
All right, then, as we move into our panel discussion today, behind tab 3, and we'll have the appropriate introductions made here momentarily. It was interesting today as I drove to Nashville. I only received one sort of testy, not irate email, but from a constituent who wonders why I or we don't want them to have broadband access in rural Tennessee. And I thought, man, how wrong can that be? I think that's exactly why we're commissioned the study. I guess we voted on it here in June, if I remember correctly. And we all very much appreciate TACIR's undertaking this endeavor because it is important to us. And it's important to the administration as well because since we've undertaken this study, I know last week or the week before at the Governor's Conference on Economic and Community Development, Commissioner Randy Boyd, announced rural initiatives and some $8 million in funding, $250,000 of which are to be devoted to a study of rural broadband. And fortunately, I think, as we'll hear today from ECD, Amy New and perhaps others, we're going to be able to collaborate in this work. I guess you could say great minds think alike, the mind of TACIR and the minds of ECD. But at the time we asked for this work to be done, you'll recall we were asking for not only a report on the current status of broadband availability, but deployment and adoption in Tennessee. There are a whole lot of things going on. People are familiar with some recent developments at the Federal Communications Commission. There's some controversy over whether the federal government, can preempt state laws that govern municipalities' ability to provide broadband. And that's an important issue. It's a very discrete issue, though. It's much narrower than the broader issue that TACIR is undertaking to study. You may recall the plan of work that we approved on this is far-reaching in terms of the topics. It's not only availability, adoption, deployment incentives. We talked about pole attachments, taxes and tax policies, broadband discounts, streamlined government costs. There are all kinds of things that are broader than municipal expansion, as important as that is in certain areas. So it is our hope that this is going to get us all sort of on an equal footing, a level playing field in terms of understanding the issues. One of the things I wish I had thought to request before the panel discussion today, but be mindful, I think we'll still need is sort of a glossary of terms. People use terms, technical terms, unwittingly sort of loosely sometimes in terms of, you're talking about internet access, broadband access, the speed. There are all kinds of variables here, and whether the fiber exists or is in the ground, is accessible but hasn't been accessed, all kinds of things like that, and the costs associated with them, and the costs to society if we don't have access. The bottom line is it's very important, and what we're trying to do is to enhance availability and access for all Tennesseans, particularly those in rural areas where it may not be conveniently or readily accessible. So bear that in mind as we go forward. We have panelists today really from both sides of both the industry and the consumer side. I think we will ask them to make their statements. If we can hold questions until the end, so be it. If you just feel compelled to ask a question, seek recognition, and we'll take it as it goes. But having said that, just by way of introduction, Lanice, is there anything? I'll defer to you to sort of set up the panels, and then we can welcome to the tables. And by the way, we did request a bigger room for today, and there were none available, so this is as good as it gets. Lanice?
I'm going to let Matthew Owen, who is the senior research associate for this project, come to the podium, and he will introduce the first panel, which is a group of people representing broadband providers, and we'll have them come forward and speak and respond to questions, and then we will let them take their seats in the audience, and we'll introduce the second panel. So we'll have Matthew come back up to make that introduction. With that, I'll turn it over to Matthew Owen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Lanice. So our first panel, which will be our panel on behalf of broadband providers and issues related to providing broadband, will include the following panelists. Lavoy Knowles, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Telecommunications Association. Daniel Hayes, the Public Affairs Director for AT&T Tennessee. John Ferris, Legal Counsel for the Tennessee Cable Telecommunications Association. Ben Lovins, Senior Vice President of the Telecommunications Division for Jackson Energy Authority. Ken Webb, the President and CEO of Cleveland Utilities. And Mike Knotts, the Director of Government Affairs for the Tennessee Electric Cooperative Association. So, thank you.
Y'all, please make yourselves at home, come forward and take a seat. And I know you've been rehearsing for many days. You've determined the order in which you will proceed. Mayor Rowland, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, a note of personal privilege. I want to point out Mr. Webb from Cleveland Utilities is the second most respected person in Cleveland.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Well, who'd like to start off, sort of set the stage, and if you will, again, just for the record, even though you've been introduced and some of us know most of you, but if you would just give us your names and identify the capacity in which you're testifying today as you begin. Who's going to lead off?
Be glad to lead off. I was first on the roster, so I'll go ahead and lead off. Mr. Chairman and committee members, good afternoon. My name is Lavoy Knowles, and I'm the Executive Director of the Tennessee Telecommunications Association, or referred to it as the TTA. My comments are being made on behalf of the TTA membership. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to serve on today's panel and to discuss the broadband connectivity issues such as deployment, adoption, and availability in the areas served by our association members. My comments will focus on some of the challenges that we face in deploying broadband, as well as the need to improve the education and adoption. But first of all, I'll give you just a quick insight on who our members are. The TTA consists of 22 small to mid-sized telephone companies and cooperatives scattered all across the state. It goes from one end to the other and in between. We serve predominantly the rural areas of Tennessee, and we cover more than 30% of Tennessee's landmass. We employ 1,700 Tennesseans. We provide service to 320,000 customers, including over 28,000 businesses. We have a total investment in Tennessee of $2.1 billion. We offer broadband speeds up to a gig in many of our areas already, but our average density is only about 12 subscribers per mile. So you can see that we serve the more rural of the rural. Our broadband availability covers 98.3% of our service area. And our average adoption rate, our subscription rate is 60% today, 60%. As I mentioned, the TTA members have invested over $2.1 billion in Tennessee, and we continue to invest in our broadband networks every year. For example, last year alone, our members invested over $93 million in our rural networks, with most of our members already going fiber to the home projects. And actually, one of our members is actually converting over 50 new subscribers a week to their fiber to the home project. Today, our members cover over 12,500 miles of fiber has been built in Tennessee by the TTA members. We're also committed to building out the broadband networks in rural areas. However, the initial outlay is a very costly endeavor as an ongoing maintenance and required upgrades. Based on this challenge, our members are working to encourage the FCC to update, and modernize the Connect America Fund, which you call CAF, C-A-F, for radio return carriers to include support for broadband, not just voice only. Recently, the FCC announced the availability of federal funding in CAF 2, but this is only for the larger carriers, which are price capped. But we are fortunate that one of our members, CenturyLink, was eligible for CAF 2 funding, and they announced they will accept those funds, which equal to $1.7 million. These funds will be invested in Tennessee along with CenturyLink's additional investment, benefiting over 5,800 customers. Additional federal funds could flow to Tennessee if the FCC revises their formula, and they're expected to do this. So what can Tennessee do to help provide broadband deployment? In our opinion, the state could provide tax incentives, such as reduced or deferred sales tax, reduced or deferred property taxes on any broadband purchases or deployments in the state in the rural areas. You also could help to educate the FCC with your letters of support for a broadband support model for the rural radio return carriers. The state legislatures and local governments could work with our national congressional delegation to help communicate the importance of broadband deployment in rural areas and the necessity of predictable and sufficient federal support. Number 3, you could also address the pole attachment issue. The current exemption from federal and state regulation of pole attachment rates allows providers to charge significantly inflated pole attachment rates that impact the private sector's investment and our ability to keep our price low to our customers. Number 4, there is a Tennessee Broadband Deployment Fund already. It's Tennessee Code 7-59-315, but there's no money in the fund. This could be seeded to provide additional funding for the initial investment and ongoing maintenance with the state. With the state, actually, you could direct when and where the investments are being made. As I previously stated, despite our significant and continuing investment in our broadband networks, the overall adoption rate for our service is lagging. The average subscription percentage for broadband service in our members' area is 60%. We believe that more emphasis should be placed on education. While we offer speeds up to a gig in a lot of our areas, 95% of the customers who do subscribe to broadband take service speeds of less than 25 megs or less. It's not because the service is not available, it's because the customers choose not to purchase the service. Broadband deployment projects are also a very costly undertaking. In building out a broadband network, a company must consider customer density and subscription rates. A company can build the network, but it's up to the customer to subscribe to the service. For example, we have several members who have already completed a 100% fiber to the home construction project already in their service territory. For example, we got one member that has spent $75 million in building out a complete fiber to the home network, but has only achieved an adoption rate of 51%. We got a second member that has spent over $50 million to date and will spend an additional $45 million before the end of 2016, and they currently have a 60% adoption rate. TTA members believe that more emphasis should be placed on education, which will help the overall adoption rate. We should be trying to educate Tennesseans on how broadband service can enhance their lives, help them in their businesses, and provide a modern way to communicate. In closing, I'd like to emphasize that the TTA members have made a significant investment in rural Tennessee and have deployed thousands of miles of fiber in our networks. The rural broadband service availability in our area is already 98.3% of our customer base. But many of our members, and also many of our members now provide a gig service in several areas. But even with this, only 95% of our customers subscribe to 25 megs or less. As I mentioned, education is an issue, not necessarily availability. For some customers, a lower speed is appropriate based on their individual or household needs. On the policy front, our members continue to aggressively pursue reforms at the national level, particularly of the Connect America Fund, encouraging them to include rate of return carriers in their new formula, allowing smaller carriers to get some more CAF funding as well. While the TTA is supportive of the need to promote and expand broadband service in Tennessee, we are opposed to the expansion of broadband by municipalities beyond their existing footprint. We strongly believe the focus for improving broadband in Tennessee is not only to find ways to promote investment by the private sector, but also to increase customer understanding of the benefits of broadband service and awareness of service availability. The results will be an increased broadband adoption rate, in our opinion. Thank you for allowing me the time today, and for allowing me to express my views on this subject.
Mr. Knowles, will you make available a copy of your comments so that we can have those?
Yes, sir.
I think it'd be helpful.
Yes, sir.
And I'll bet there are, you've prompted a lot of questions in folks' minds.
Sure.
You covered a lot of territory, and in many terms that are used: rural rate of return, the speed, the whole gig thing. Has this been distributed to everybody? We have a chart that has not been provided. It's just recently come into our possession, not from the speakers, but Lenice had gotten this in research just mid-morning today about broadband technologies and examples of applications performing at various speeds. I encounter that when I talk to various constituents. You know, they use the term internet and broadband interchangeably. Right. How do you address that? Just a real simple question there. I mean,
It's a speed. Internet could be anything from dial-up on up, but broadband is actually where the FCC defines what the speeds there are, and it's a changing number, but I think it's 4 and 1 currently, going to maybe 3 and 10, I think, megabits.
And just tell us what that means, 4 to 1.
4 down, 3 up, or
and
4.
If you would, just explain what that means.
If you're downloading something from the net, then it's going to be faster than it is you're going pushing something up to the net. So
4 megs
4
down,
megabit, yes, sir.
1 meg up.
Yes, sir.
Kind of thing. I mean, this becomes important as we proceed, just to have the basic understanding, and I think our constituents need to have it too. I've been trying to learn it. This is a very broad question. I'll yield to others who may have some, but in a situation where you have a municipality outside of which it is so sparsely populated that you know of no commercial provider who would be otherwise interested in extending service, is there objection to allowing, in those rare cases, the municipalities to provide service?
I don't think so. The objective is to get every Tennessean access to broadband, and if someone wants to serve an unserved area, then I don't see a huge obstacle.
You and I haven't met. I hadn't asked you that question before, but I think it's important to get some of the foundation concepts in mind here, because as my intention, as I've sensed it the last several months, I don't know of anybody who doesn't want to make sure everybody has access to adequate internet or broadband, whichever the case may be. So
You may hear multiple terms: unserved, underserved, or a duplicated service, which you got two networks that will be duplicating the same service. That you don't want. Underserved is you can get the internet, but maybe not the speed you want. And underserved, you can't get it at all. Unserved.
The other concept that I'm sensitive to and grappling with, and I want the members to think about, is not only the cost benefit to constituents, but the cost benefit to the providers, because there's a tipping point here where we don't want to I don't want to say kill the golden goose, but it's very expensive to make these capital improvements in many cases. When I carried various bills for the administration, and we have changes in the tax laws, for example, things like intangibles, if those affect your members, Lavoy, and it may adversely impact their ability to continue making investments in deployment expansion to the extent they currently are. I don't know where that tipping point is, but it's easy for some folks to say, well, everybody ought to have access, and then turn around and rather than providing tax incentives, maybe be providing tax disincentives, which can adversely affect what we're trying to accomplish here today. All right, I've said enough. Any questions by the members for Mr. Knowles? All right, I'm sure there'll be some as we go. So next, from AT&T, you're not Joelle, and I know she couldn't be here. Joelle Phillips had planned to be here and had extenuating circumstances, so we're happy to have you in her place.
Thank you, absolutely, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Certainly, Joelle would perform much more ably than I, but glad to be here. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Daniel Hayes. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for AT&T in Tennessee, and we appreciate the invitation to discuss the status of broadband deployment and adoption in the state. The important work of this Commission will help to ensure that the dialogue around broadband deployment, access, and adoption is one that's based on facts. We think it's important to capture the significant broadband investment already being made in Tennessee and to clearly identify the opportunities for increased investments and, in particular, increased use of broadband infrastructure. AT&T has been here in Tennessee and connected Tennesseans to each other and to the rest of the world for more than 135 years. Our employees have been deploying fiber optic networks across the state for more than 30 years. That fiber has driven economic development in Tennessee, providing businesses with the robust connectivity, including multi-gigabit offerings and modern communication services that they need. We continue that aggressive investment in Tennessee today, thanks in large part to the pro-business policies enacted by members of the General Assembly, many of whom are serving on this commission. Also note that Chairman Norris, in particular, has sponsored, co-sponsored, or led every significant advancement in telecommunications policy in Tennessee over the past few years. And those efforts have cultivated an environment that attracts investment to Tennessee. From 2012-2014 in Tennessee alone, AT&T invested more than $1.2 billion in capital in our wired and wireless broadband networks. And in 2014, we spent more than $1 billion purchasing goods and services from Tennessee-based suppliers, supporting jobs and economic activity in the state. We're spending this capital to deploy AT&T's Gigapower in Nashville, Clarksville, Murfreesboro, Smyrna, and other communities in the mid-state, to upgrade communities across Tennessee with UVerse broadband and video, to expand and enhance 4G LTE in Tennessee, improving the speed and reliability of our wireless network, which covers nearly 96% of Tennessee's population with high-speed internet connections. That's why folks in the room are able to check Facebook while I'm talking today. This work's happening all across Tennessee. We're not only providing broadband to residents of big cities like Knoxville, Memphis, and Nashville, but also to residents of communities like Crab Orchard, Dayton, Cleveland, Friendship, Hurricane Mills, Soddy Daisy, Sweetwater, and 10 Mile. Traffic across our wireless broadband networks has grown at a remarkable rate, increasing by more than 100,000% from 2007 to 2014. To me, this makes a significant point for your consideration. As the Commission works to assess the state of broadband access and adoption and develops recommendations, it's important that the discussion be technology neutral. We don't know where the future will take us, so it's important to consider all forms of wired and wireless broadband connections. The affordability and functionality of wireless connectivity through smartphones, hotspots, and other wireless devices has accelerated the closing of the digital divide over the years. Today's wireless networks transmit data from connected cars, connected tractors and combines, connected homes, wearable wireless devices, traffic lights and utility systems in smart cities, and machines and other equipment in manufacturing facilities. All of this is made possible because of the investments by private telecommunications providers in Tennessee to deploy modern networks that make high-speed connections to the internet available to more than 99% of residents across the state. That's not AT&T's data, by the way. That's information compiled by the FCC and the NTIA as part of the National Broadband Map, and I'm sure that's something that TACIR staff is reviewing. This data clearly shows that high-speed internet is widely accessible across Tennessee through a variety of devices, services, and technologies, whether wired or wireless. The same data clarifies that the limited accessibility gap that remains in Tennessee is in rural residential areas. That's why programs like the FCC's Connect America Fund that LaVoy mentioned just a minute ago are an important way for government to encourage deployment to the private sector, by the private sector, excuse me. Through the program, the FCC identified census blocks where broadband, through a fixed connection and with minimum download speeds of 10 megabits per second, was not available. According to the FCC, that's approximately 93,000 locations in Tennessee. It should be noted that many of these locations do have access to wireless connections that exceed the speed threshold, but again, to qualify, they needed a fixed connection. The good news is that the FCC is providing financial incentives to 3 telephone companies, including AT&T, to supplement investments to extend broadband to these census blocks. I grew up in rural Robertson County, just up the road, and I've seen firsthand how the investments of private industry have changed the definition of connectivity over the years. As a kid, the outside world was delivered to our home by 3 broadcast networks and a good set of rabbit ears. I remember the pings and squawks of the first dial-up modem that connected my parents' home to the internet. But today, when I sit down at Sunday dinner with my family, we've got multiple folks on a variety of devices, updating fantasy football lineups, streaming videos, communicating with clients, and posting, liking, and sharing on social media. Broadband connections to the internet today are faster, more convenient, and offer much greater capacity and are more widespread. AT&T agrees with the Commission's focus on adoption as well as availability. We all share an interest in increasing digital literacy and reducing the disparity, between the number of Tennesseans who have access to high-speed internet and those who actually use it. Over the years, a variety of studies have revealed 2 primary obstacles to the adoption of the internet: a perceived lack of relevance to one's life and a fear of hacking or spamming that comes from a general unfamiliarity with how to use the internet. It's our belief that the community that finds a way to overcome those obstacles to help its citizens build digital literacy skills that allow them to harness the power of the internet will be well on its way to being a true technology hub. Again, these connections are becoming so interwoven in our lives, and there's no doubt that the primary reason for that is that Tennessee private telecommunications providers are investing in Tennessee. AT&T's 5,700 employees, as well as their thousands of counterparts and other companies, are working in urban and rural communities alike, building out broadband and connecting Tennesseans and helping spur economic development. We are equally committed to the education efforts to expand broadband adoption in Tennessee. And as part of that, if I could just take a second, go back to the speed question that you had. The FCC defines baseline broadband as 4 megabits down, 1 megabit upload. So that's the basic speed for broadband. The next level is 10 megabit download, 1 megabit upload, which is basically the definition they give for funding. So programs that are established by the FCC that, for example, the USF fund, CAF2, the criteria is it has to have a minimum speed of 10 megabit download, 1 megabit upload. And then they also have announced, you'll hear discussion of a 25-3 discussion. That is a target, a future speed, a target that the FCC has set. So those are the 3 categories that are out there right now. But we look forward to many more years of working as a partner with the state of Tennessee in an environment that welcomes investment and encourages innovation in high-speed communications networks. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Mr. Hayes, I must have misunderstood you. I know Mayor Vickers is over there just dying to cross-examine because that's what he does so well. But I'm sure I got this wrong. Did you say that 96% of the population is provided with access?
They're covered by AT&T's 4G network. That's the 96% number. According to the FCC and the NTIA and the National Broadband Map, 99.1% of Tennesseans have access at the 10.1 speeds, and that's either through wired or wireless connectivity. So that's not exclusive to one provider or one technology. And again, that's not our numbers. Those are the numbers from the FCC.
All right. So some of the 99% then is cell phone.
Correct.
Okay. And the 96% again
is AT&T's 4G, the LTE network.
And that's just AT&T?
Correct. And that's 96% of the population, not necessarily geography. We're talking population.
So then you also said there are 93,000 locations, I think I heard you say, that are not served.
That are not served by a minimum of 10.1, 10 megabit download, 1 megabit upload, and also not served by, that connection has to be a fixed connection. So it excludes wireless as part of CAF2.
See, the plot thickens. Iliff, did you have a question? Mr. McMahon, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick before I forget.
Sure.
And you're talking about the 96 and the 99. I get that. But you said it was based on population. Do you have it broken down based on rural population? I mean, 88% of our counties are rural.
Sure.
Almost, well, the majority of them are rural. And I was just wondering if you had it based, because according to those figures, either you haven't marketed my communities or they're not buying. You know you see what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. On the for the FCC numbers, there is a breakdown both from urban population and rural population. So those figures through the National Broadband Map and NTIA, you can make those distinctions. I'm sure that we can get AT&T's information to you according to that breakdown, but I don't have that. So.
I think, Mr. Chairman, if it'd be all right, I think that would be a really helpful thing, because for those of us that serve the entire state, and that's what we do at state, is serve the entire state.
Sure.
I think it would be really great to see where the spots are really thin. I mean, it's one thing to talk about, Davidson County or downtown
Sure.
Nashville or something,
Absolutely.
but you're not hitting the rural areas. And
Right.
I think that would be very helpful for us in seeing exactly how spotty it is and where the attention needs to go.
And there are maps that are available that can help to show
Okay.
that and that would incorporate, it wouldn't be provider specific. It would show wireless networks. So we can absolutely get those maps to you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so as we're beginning to quantify the issue, Mayor Huffman, I didn't know if you sought recognition or not. Chairman Wirgo, did you have a question?
Yeah, you talked about the upload and the downloads, things that I understand from a business standpoint. How often does the FCC come in and say you've got to increase that or you have to decrease that?
There isn't a set schedule for that. I believe the 4.1 speeds were first established, I believe, in 2009. And you'll have to forgive me, I can get you that information. But the 10.1 speeds are set associated with CAF2, specific to CAF2. And then I believe they mentioned 25.3 as being the target speed earlier this year. May have been January, February, around that time frame. So it's more of kind of an assessment of the industry and what the consumers, what the market is heading toward, as opposed to a set time frame. Now on the mapping and the data, that information, that's done on a continual basis, and that updated information comes out typically early spring of every year, but it's compiled during the fall.
And I say that because I, too, am one of them rural communities, but I also see in the years that I've been up here as that number keeps declining, as I alluded to your numbers of investment of $1.2 billion 2013 and $1 billion 2014 alone, because I can say the calls that used to come are now decreasing, and we got, and I heard you say Hurricane Mills, that's one of my areas in the district of Stewart County, and I know that we have been developing and progressing more and more each year, and I'll just say publicly thank you for the investment for that to allow to have the broadband. But I was just curious of how often does that number fluctuate by the FCC. Thank you.
Other questions, Mr. Hayes? I would your statement that I guess you said the study that one of the two greatest inhibitors are the perceived lack of relevance and fear of hacking. You'll get some pushback on a statement like that. You want to elaborate on that at all? Because the people I hear from, they think 10.1 is too slow, even when they can get at it, and those are the least of their concerns. But
sure,
where does that come from?
And if I may, again, that information doesn't come from AT&T. Pew Research Institute does a study every so often on internet usage, the market, and it's a nationwide study. And their most recent data, by far, identifies that the two main obstacles are folks who believe that it's not relevant to their life. They have no use, no need for it. And then the second one is basically a lack of understanding of how to use the internet, so they're afraid that they'll be spammed or hacked. Well down the list is cost. That's number 3. But as part of cost, it's the cost of a device, so a home computer is the primary driver of that. As far as 10.1 speeds are concerned, when the FCC announced that they were setting aside $10 billion in CAF2 funding, they remarked on the 10.1 speeds that it would cover a broad spectrum of uses online for a variety of users. So by their definition, a minimum of 10.1 does meet the needs of residential consumers in these rural, high-cost areas. So.
The Connect America funds and CAF2, what are the projections again as to the 93 locations?
They've identified, according to census blocks, approximately 93,000 locations that would be funded through this, or that they would supplement deployment on this. So
is there a timeline then for?
Yes. The timeline is, and there are different benchmarks along the way, but it's a 6-year deployment that begins in 2015 and has to be complete by 2020. I believe 40% of the build has to be complete by 2017 with additional benchmarks along the way.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Hayes, we may come back, and I know you've got your comments. You'll be able to submit your written comments for the record.
Thank you.
All right, next. Mr. Ferris.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you all. I'm John Ferris, legal counsel for the Tennessee Cable Telecommunications Association, also their chief lobbyist here in Nashville. And what I'd like to do is sort of approach this from a legal standpoint a little bit, give you a little perspective. That way we can come back and provide you with all the numbers of our customers, investment, financial information that you might want to see. Let me begin by starting back. I'm going to try to do this very quickly, but it's important that you understand this. Back in the early 90s, the cable industry wanted to compete in the telephone business. Tennessee was really on the forefront of that. In 1995, Tennessee passed a bill that became law that allowed cable to compete with the legacy Bell South system here. Our laws had really not been changed since the 1930s. So you're talking about laws that have been on the books for about 60 years. That was 1995. In 1996, the federal government came along and passed its telecommunications law that set up a federal framework for competition to begin in the telephone business across the country. In 1997, the General Assembly here changed the law that allowed the municipal electrics to compete in the telephone business. We put in place, at that time there was really no model, it was just people sitting around a table, and we came up with sort of a framework on how that would look. Then we went on in 1999, we passed a law that would allow the municipal electrics to compete in the video business and video and internet business. And at that time, it was I'm not even sure it was a huge point of contention, but it was within their service area, within their footprint. And so that began. And all of this, if you've been around a while, was during the dot-com era. You know, money was cheap, the internet was just developing, and so you know, it was something that people wanted to get into. People, you know, a lot of customers didn't like the cable business. There was less demand there at that time from customers. Competition was not as robust at that time. So these laws came on the books. And, of course, the dot-com era ended shortly after 1999. And then in 2003, the General Assembly authorized one pilot, which is Covington Electric, to go outside its service area. They had begun and gone into the cable business, followed the process that we had set up, and they wanted to go in the cable business. Shortly after that, in 2004, Morristown Utilities was authorized to go beyond its service area. So you had two pilot projects that allowed the utilities to go beyond their service area. You know, the track record of the utilities providing video services, in our opinion, has not been very good. I'm going to try to tie this to broadband because it is linked to some degree, Mr. Chairman, in a number of ways. So, you know, the comptroller, another bill was passed. The comptroller came back with a report that said there should be no further expansion of allowing municipal electrics to come back till he came back with his report. The comptroller actually came back with a report saying that he did not recommend any further expansion. This was, I believe, I may have this wrong, but I think it was in 2006, 2008 time frame. 2000, while all this is going on, AT&T wanted to get in the video business. So we dealt with the Cable and Video Services Act in 2008, which allowed AT&T to get a state franchise if they wanted to, or they could go to the local governments. So this is how this competition sort of began. The laws that we passed in 1997 governing how the municipal electrics compete with private business have really not changed. Just from a group of people sitting around a table trying to figure out what to do. They really haven't changed since 1997 and 1999. So that's sort of a backdrop to, you know, to what the state of Tennessee law is. Since that time, as most of you know, the municipal electrics have tried to get additional authority to go beyond their footprint in, you know, cable, internet, video business. Cable industry, the private side, has tried to pass bills dealing with pole attachments and also trying to provide some more framework around how the government, if it's going to compete in video business, you know, updating the 1997, 1999 law. So there's some, I don't know, coordination, check and balance of that from just people sitting around the table. So I guess from our standpoint, to get back to broadband, any consideration of the deployment of broadband, this committee and the legislature has got to remove all of the barriers to the private sector providing service. That should be pole attachment rates. that should be permitting issues, that should be make-ready issues, that should be everything. Everything should be on the table. And TACIR should that would be number one, remove all of those things before you consider any step forward with how the government, if the government should compete in this arena further than what they have. And so that would be my number one principle. And to kind of get to that issue, Tennessee is alone. I mean, absolutely alone in a very negative way in all of those issues, the barriers to providing these services, pole attachment rates. You've got municipal electrics all across the state that essentially are unregulated monopolies in how they demand what a private sector person or a company would pay. Make ready, applications for permits, all of these things. Tennessee's alone. There's only one utility, privately owned utility. I think it's up in Kingsport. Otherwise, you've got a set of co-ops and municipal electrics all across the state that have their own set of rules that you either play by or you don't play. And how this affects the deployment of broadband is that if AT&T or Comcast or some of the voice companies want to do some of these things, and you've got a finite amount of money that you've got to spend across the country, where are you going to go spend it? You're going to go to a place where, those rules are better than Tennessee's because they're all just a patchwork of rules. And this plot thickens a little bit, as you said a moment ago, because many of these utilities engage in anti-competitive practices, the ones that compete with us. They're anti-consumer because, in many cases, because we choose not to go by their rules that they demand, we don't deploy the services. And I mean, I'm not talking about rural Tennessee. I'm talking about downtown Nashville, Memphis. If we have to put it up on a pole, we can't get a permit from the utility. We'll AT&T, since they may have a pole attachment agreement, the company will go with our competitor. So it's very timely that those of you that are in business understand that if I cut a deal with a customer, I can't provide the service within a certain length of time, they go to the next guy because they got to have it. So it's pervasive. And I would just say this, our rules, because we have no rules, conflict with federal law, the FCC formula on poles. They conflict with about 20 other states that have opted out and have their own set of rules. Those rules are very similar to what the federal government has. And so Tennessee's way behind on that. Continues to be. And I want to give you a couple of other examples when I say anti-competitive behavior. Our utility in Memphis, for instance, has adopted a customer service policy, that would apply to a cable provider, telephone provider that says if essentially that if you don't have a pole attachment agreement with us, then you default into this customer service policy. And guess what? Your pole attachment rate is several times the federal formula, the national standard. And so you're essentially forced into, entering into, an agreement. And that's, we think that's wrong. And I guess let me just close by mentioning a couple of things. If Tennessee were to remove those barriers, knock all those barriers down. I think I can speak on behalf of the cable industry that we would commit to consider moving outside our footprint and make a serious investment to try to get service to everyone. And then the second thing, just as a suggestion, the state of Indiana passed a bill earlier this year that created broadband-ready communities. And what happens is the community, there's a set of guidelines that they have to meet, and that makes them, broadband ready. And so once you get certified as being broadband ready, it's at least a signal that the community has done everything from a local standpoint of encouraging the investment, encouraging the industry, private investors to come out there. That's just an example.
The community equivalent of a mega site, right? Ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Well, this is interesting. We've sort of had the three contexts established here: the technological context to begin with, the demographic context, and now Mr. Ferris has given us a legal context. And I think the history is instructive. Mayor Bickers.
Mr. Ferris, I was struck by your comment about the need to further deregulate and the supposition that would broaden service. It used to be in our community that the law required whoever provided cable or internet had to sit down with me and negotiate out a license, which gave me the opportunity to say, all right, let's talk about how we're going to make sure all of our citizens are provided. And we could talk about the various barriers and how we could remove those and make the agreement one that worked for you and provide service to us. But under what I understand was an attempt to deregulate, the legislature was convinced to allow that to be taken away from the state, from the municipal level, and a state agreement would be put in place, which absolutely removed any leverage we had or any ability, so that even though, our community was blessed yesterday with announcing a $530 million new investment that's going to create 600 high-paying engineer jobs. And we got that because we could provide good, high-quality broadband. I have areas in my town where we don't have broadband within 2 miles of that site, because the companies have decided that it's not economically feasible for them to do it. We have schools that don't have good broadband access because the companies have decided that it's not economically feasible to run it there. So I'm struggling with, my experience has been deregulation has limited broadband access as opposed to broadening it. And I'll give you a chance to expound on that if you'd like.
Sure. Well, you're referring to the Competitive Cable and Video Act that we passed back in 2008. And I think to some degree your comments are correct. I would say that what happens with the utility and what happens in City Hall sometimes are not the same thing. So the leverage you're talking about probably went away with maybe that Video Act that was passed. But they were never necessarily linked. The local franchising was never linked to pole attachment rates or barriers to entry or anything else. I think, if we had franchise agreements where the city governments would put some language in there and put pressure on the utilities to cooperate with the private sector, you'd probably see the private sector coming back to the local governments. They've just never been linked.
So if the legislature were to take a relook at this as a way of dealing with this and say, we wish to enable local governments to have greater control, even over the utilities, to try to eliminate these barriers, because sometimes it's easier to identify and eliminate barriers locally than it is statewide. Would that be supported by you and other members of this panel?
Oh, I don't, if you want to go back, I mean, the Cable Video Services Act was about a 40-page bill we worked on for 3 years. I don't think AT&T would want to go back and take a relook at all that, and I don't think the cable industry would either. But it's just a fact. It's a fact. If the government wants to continue to push back, not eliminate some of these barriers, and I'm not saying that there's not a place for government in the truly unserved areas, but is it really a good investment to have a utility overbuild three different providers? Wireless, wireline, cable. I mean, is that really what the government needs to be doing? I don't think so, and I don't think your taxpayers would agree to that either. So anyway, just a different perspective.
Let me recognize Chairman Wergo, and then we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me, I'm intense with this topic as I sit on the committees and play a key role on the committees that these bills come through. So as I was passionate about another issue last month, I'm passionate about this. And when I say passionate, I want to gather all the facts to make an educated decision because, like you said, there are so many variables.
So, excuse me, does that mean you were glad that TACIR is taking this on?
I'm glad that we're studying this. That is correct.
Oh, thank you,
So, and I appreciate the opportunity. So forgive me, other members. But I think it's important. We talked about the regulation from the law side, and about the MEG. Does when the government comes in and says we got to have 10 megs up or whatever, does that incorporate every state, or is that just designed to Tennessee? And I don't care who answers the question. I'm just wondering who has the answer to that one.
Sure. With that being an FCC program, it's a nationwide standard.
So we're not just picking on, in that incident, the state of Tennessee. So that is a regulation that has to be all across.
Correct.
We talked about the discussions of Connect America and that starting. How is that determined? Who will receive what monies to help expand onto this?
As Lavoie mentioned, there are three carriers in Tennessee, the price cap carriers, AT&T, CenturyLink, and Frontier, I believe is the third, who have received Connect America funds, the CAF2 funds. And again, the 93,000 connections that the FCC identified are within the service areas of those three providers.
So that's where our focus is going to be, is on them 93 areas of where we need to, where we feel is the greatest need?
Well, again, they're defined by the FCC, and they're considered high-cost deployment areas. So these are rural areas. There's an additional level to it of the CAF2 funds that come next year that are bid on that are referred to as extreme high cost, I believe, for deployment. But these are standards that are set by the FCC, and they identify these areas.
So are these standards set throughout all states and not just Tennessee again?
Right.
So there's other areas in, we'll say, Nevada, California, Michigan, that they're saying these are the areas that you need to.
Yes,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see now, Mr. Hayes. Did you have anything else you want to say?
And just to speak to the mayor's question earlier, that's why his question gives a great example of why the discussion here is so important. You mentioned the customers who are 2 miles away from this one location where you have robust broadband service that are without access. If I may, I would love to connect with you afterwards just to get the addresses for those locations. Because
no pun
we can
intended.
absolutely pull information about service providers in the area and services that are available. And also on the discussion of schools and hospitals and libraries, there's yet another FCC program that has made those areas of particular interest to private providers, and it's E-rate funding that comes in to supplement investments there. And so, it's my experience that schools, hospitals, and libraries have robust connections. So I would also love to hear, of the information on these schools that are lacking. So,
Mr. Knowles.
Just to clarify one thing on the FCC areas they've determined to be underserved. The map, they put a lot of money into this map and determined by census blocks. And I remember everybody's heard about census blocks. They're very small geographic areas. A census block can be actually as small as a street light. Usually not that small, but can be. And so the census blocks are what they've identified as either unserved or underserved. That's where the money's been funneled to, not necessarily by company or by what carrier, but it's and that would be, in my view, would be a good thing for the community to have a copy of that map that the FCC has produced, where the census blocks are shown to be underserved or unserved in Tennessee. I don't have it, but I'm sure you could get access to it. But that's a little more definitive on your mapping part of it.
Mr. Young.
Yes, Mr. Ferris, I believe you mentioned that poll rates were kind of a barrier or a problem in terms of expanding into the rural areas. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe those are regulated by the feds, the poll attachment rates. And if I'm correct, what authority does the state have?
You're not correct. The municipal electrics and the co-ops, the electric co-ops here in Tennessee, they're exempted out of the federal law. So they're not subject. For instance, let me just give you an example on the barriers. I'll have a pole that's right here that I'm renting from NES. I could be paying, I'm just making this up, I could be paying $30 a pole. I have a pole that I'm renting from AT&T because they're subject to the federal law, $6 for that pole, right next to it. The geography is the exact same thing. You don't have to, I'm not talking about a pole that's in a mountain and a pole that's in West Tennessee. I'm talking about poles right next to each other. I could be paying them $30, $35 for that pole. And for AT&T, because they're proprietary and they're subject to the federal rate, I would be paying, I don't know what the federal rate is, $5, $6, $7 for a pole right next to it. So how can that pole, why should it cost me, 5 times that to provide service to my customers? And so there are instances where companies will not go into the rural areas because of the cost imposed for those poles that are not subject to the federal rate. And that's the barrier, one of the barriers.
Barriers to entry. Representative Carter, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ferris, TCA 759-316C limits the amount that is charged by the municipal electric provider if it's going into an underserved area to 50% of its rate, does it not? I think that's what Mr. Young was asking. We've got a state statute. I guess I thought today's hearing was more on underserved areas, not Nashville. We know that Nashville's getting a gig, has a gig, going to get a gig or something. But my folks in Appleton and Black Fox and in Bradley County, they think they're just as important as Nashville. Maybe they're not. I thought they were. So why is that an impediment? If we're looking to go into the rural areas, we've already got a statute limiting the cost to 50% of what the other charges are. Isn't that what you wanted?
No, it's not. I don't think that the section you referred to applies as you just stated, Representative.
I'll be glad to read it to you.
Well, I've got it here.
A historically underserved area to which there is no access to broadband internet service. A municipality cooperatively owned utility shall not request nor receive in exchange for pole attachment any pole attachment charge from a cable or video service provider or telecommunication joint venture, any amount that exceeds 50% of the highest pole attachment charge by that municipality, and goes on. Is that not what that means?
I think that deals with the joint venture.
Well, it lists joint venture among the others, but nevertheless, I guess I thought we were talking about primarily rural areas in this. May I ask AT&T a question? Thank you for being here, and I understand Joel can't, and we all understand that. The average pole attachment rate, is it not, for broadband in Tennessee runs about $2 per pole if you average all of them in Tennessee?
My experience of that, and
make sure you speak in the mic.
Oh, sorry. My understanding of that is it's quite a bit higher than that. The FCC standard, I believe that Mr. Ferris mentioned, is $7 for the pole attachment, and the average that AT&T pays statewide is well north of that, closer to about 4 times that.
It looks like Chattanooga and Electric Power Board is just a bargain then, I guess, because they're at about $1.50 per pole in underserved areas. So that would be an anomaly. Even though the mayor and I have a vast area, one of the largest areas in Tennessee that's not served by anything other than your wireless. Now, and I appreciate that. I've been a wireless customer. I had to run a business on one because I couldn't get Charter to move 80 feet to me. When you say 96% of the state is covered, you're including in that iPhones. You're including
the 4G LTE network. Yes, sir.
Okay.
96%.
So we're not talking about hardwired internet service. If you back out and go down to your hardwired internet service, what percent of Tennessee is covered?
I don't have that information. I can get it for you though. But
all right. And thank you for that. Let me ask you one other thing. I think AT&T gets $26.1 million this year to serve the underserved areas.
As part of the CAF2 funds, it does average out to about $26
I don't know
million.
what CAF2 is. All I know is that's government funding coming to you to expand broadband. What is the difference between those government dollars coming to you and the government dollars that comes to the municipal utilities? How are those funds not fungible?
Sure. I think it's a very clear distinction. One, the CAF2 funds are set up to address a very specific problem that the federal government has identified, and that's lack or a gap in accessibility in high-cost rural areas. And it's designed to supplement investments that are being made by private industry. So that is helping to keep private industry as the ones that are investing. On the other side of the coin, with the funding for municipal networks, that is funding that's solely intended to, as Mr. Ferris mentioned, that has overbuilt multiple private providers in an area. So it is not addressing an area that's unserved.
Well, but that's competition. If they want to overbill, that's their business, right? I mean, that's their business. What we're primarily talking about are underserved. All right, what I'm primarily interested in are the private areas. I guess at my home and my business, I've got 3 or 4 different providers. I had a DSL from you guys, and it worked fabulously. I was very near the hub, and so it worked great. Other people were very upset with it. I had a great experience with it, so I do appreciate that. But if all of you are getting federal funding and state funding and all these different funds from CAF2 to whatever the terminology is, why wouldn't we just allow competition on all levels so that the consumer is the ultimate winner? Because if we just put one broadband in there, I think I saw where UVerse in Charlotte was $69 and another town was $130 because there was no competition. I understand that. I'm in business. If I'm the only dog in the pound, I'm going to get a little more to eat, I would assume. But I'm interested in, is there some opposition to just opening it up to competition and letting them all compete?
No, I mean,
if you all weren't getting any federal funding, no dollars, you were a private industry, then I'm with you 100%. But since we're all in this feed trough to get all the government funding we can get, why not open it to everybody?
Sure, and I appreciate that. For example, in Chattanooga when they were looking to attract Volkswagen to the area. The state provided incentives. They didn't instead fund the construction of a car manufacturing facility. They didn't start delivering cars and compete against private industry. I think it's kind of the same example here. From AT&T's perspective, with deployment to unserved areas, and that's your focus, AT&T is not opposed to municipal networks in unserved areas. That's been our position from day one. But again, we don't feel that public monies should be used to compete against private industry.
Yeah.
Even though you're getting the same federal funding.
In areas that are identified as unserved.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're about halfway through the first panel. Ms. Ferris, I saw you seeking recognition. Have you thought better of that?
I'm good. I think my AT&T colleague has taken care of that.
Who's next?
Hi, I'm Ben Lovin, Senior Vice President of Telecommunications for Jackson Energy Authority, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's good to see you again, Senator Norris. We offer electric, water, wastewater, natural gas, propane, and telecommunication services to approximately 40,000 homes in Jackson and Madison County areas. JEA entered the telecom business in 2004. Many people have asked, well, why, what caused that? So I'll go through just a quick bit of our history here. John Williams, president of then Jackson Utility Division, found himself at a crossroads in the late 90s. An industrial prospect asked him about the availability of high-speed connectivity. His customers were asking for competition to the incumbent cable system, and the largest telecom providers told him that Jackson didn't need that type of connectivity. John knew better. The community had to be able to answer yes to all industrial, commercial, and residential needs for Jackson and Madison County to be successful. With John's determination, the Tennessee legislature approved our private act in 2001 that formed the Jackson Energy Authority and paved the way for the fiber to the home in Jackson. Today, the telecom division serves 18,000 customers and has annual revenue approaching $30 million. All of this was achieved through local choice, no taxes, and no government funding. Municipal utilities like Chattanooga, Morristown, Bristol, Tullahoma, Clarksville, Jackson, and Pulaski build infrastructure. We invest in systems for long-term use and a commitment to the future strength of our communities. Due to the inherent nature of our structures, our goals reach far beyond the current fiscal quarter performance. We invest with an eye toward the next several decades and the ability to serve customers across all socioeconomic strata. While you will hear much about speeds, I do want to make this point. There are definitely minimum speeds. We could definitely argue 10.1, 4.1, probably 25/3 is getting somewhat there. But speed is just a proxy for fiber. You can't achieve reliable, low latency, multi-gigabit speeds without it. Fiber is the platform to build if you want to seriously be prepared for the future. All other technologies are extensions off the core backbone that is fiber, but all solutions continually move closer to the end user. We are already there with fiber to the home. So many leaders are at a crossroads just like Mr. Williams was over a decade ago. Do rural communities simply resign themselves to being unserved or underserved in this critical area? City and county mayors and local leadership know what is best for their communities. They're willing to fight for their citizens to see their communities grow and embrace connectivity today. It's time to act. This is why I'm encouraged by leaders like Chairman Norris who understand the importance of what is before us today. And you're correct when you said internet access is no longer a luxury. It's fundamental to economic growth of our state and is important in providing more educational opportunities, job training, and advanced telemedicine. And I applaud your efforts to make competitive, true high-speed data accessible to all Tennesseans, enabling them to have the chance to prosper in our great state. So we know battles lie ahead. As we enter into the TACIR study and the subsequent legislative session, I ask everyone to consider the Latin phrase, cui bono. So who benefits, right? If communities are not given local choice, who benefits? incumbent telecom providers and those who support them. Conversely, who benefits if local communities are given local choice to tackle the challenges before them? Ratepayers, families, students, small business owners, industry, healthcare, agriculture, and many others benefit from high-speed connectivity and competition. In-home health monitoring will continue to increase, allowing our seniors to remain in their homes longer. Drones are being tested and used in precision agriculture to increase yield. High school students in Jackson are learning how to code applications, with the 5th rated student out of 200,000 worldwide being a student in Jackson-Madison County schools. Citizens can obtain degrees totally online, assisting with the Governor's Drive to 55 initiative. The Tennessee Promise is being fulfilled largely online, and all these are unachievable without affordable, reliable, true high-speed data. Hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans lack true broadband, and our areas of the state are struggling to thrive in a connected world. Many would like to make this a very complicated issue, to confuse the issue until you forget. You know, this isn't the first year that we've looked at this issue, for sure. Some make it about public versus private, pole attachment fees, how much speed is needed. But it truly is a simple matter. Give local leaders the choice to work solutions that best fit their communities, and that includes, in cases, allowing municipal systems to work together to help our neighbors. When John Williams passed away recently, we lost a true visionary. He was a leader who removed roadblocks, provided the tools and support needed, and allowed talented and committed people to accomplish the mission. These are the same characteristics our communities need from local leaders and our state legislature on the broadband issue. Do we have challenges? Undeniably. Do we have opportunity? Absolutely. When Americans are given the choice and the tools to succeed, they will. Google Fiber is coming to Middle Tennessee, and telecom giants are responding. Competition has not cooled investment. 7 Tennessee communities decided years ago to bring our communities into the 21st century. We stand ready to help our neighbors in the rest of the state who are woefully underserved. The Tennessee fiber optic communities, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lovins. Mayor Rowland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lovins, I have questions for all of you when the panel is completed. What's the difference between your electric rate payers and your broadband payers? How do you divide that?
Sure. So the way JEA has established the broadband division, it's a totally separate division. We have our own bond debt, which are due in 2026. We pay all allocated costs. We have direct telecom employees, and then we pay allocated costs for another 30 or so full-time equivalents. There is absolutely, and this will be another issue that'll come through the study, is cross-subsidization and different things. But to that point, I would say that the comptroller, we've been audited 12 years. Everything is very clean on that. We don't have any issues with it. So that just becomes fodder for the conversation. Our ratepayers, so I guess one of the questions might be, how does our business, and I say our business, telecom business, affect ratepayers? If anything, it has reduced the load on electric ratepayers looking at our cost of operations. Because I pay, if you have a CFO, the other divisions split that. Now I split that with them. Accounting, customer service, any other functional areas. So we bill separately. It's a combined bill that's presented to the customer, but we have a system that authenticates and drives those charges into the billing system. So, sure.
Chairman Wirgo.
You stated you offered lots of services. Who is JEA owned by?
JEA is owned by the ratepayers.
By the ratepayers. And how is your business financed?
It is financed through, the telecom division is financed through revenue bonds. We don't do there's no GO bonds or anything like that. So when we built the system, it was has been totally paid for to this point. We have, again, the bonds are due in 2026 through the revenues generated by selling services. There's no taxes.
Selling all of your services.
The telecom division stands alone in that. So the other divisions have their own bond issues as well, which I'm not really up to speed on, but we can get some information for you on that. But telecom has its own bond issue.
As I understand it, EBP in Chattanooga preempted the FCC to preempt the Tennessee state law, which in my book, here we go, rather than a law all across the country, we're dealing with Tennessee laws, which means it's to override the legislators' decisions, such as Senator Norris and Senator McNally, Senator Tracy Yarbo, and the representatives that serve. Did JEA support that letter to the FCC?
JEA was not involved with that letter, but I would say Harold DePriest is here if you would like to have him recognized to ask questions about that case.
Could we do that, Chairman?
I was speaking with the vice chair. What's the question? Could we?
The question was, did JEA support EBP Chattanooga when they asked to preempt the Tennessee state law to override its legislators? Did they join in on that?
The answer was no.
Okay. Does JDE provide broadband services outside of their footprint?
We have electric into the county, and we have services into that part of the county. And so we have there's a couple of areas that we have broadband now into under the Title II changes that came through with the FCC. We fully expect the federal or the state legislature to move forward with being able to serve out there too.
So that's outside the footprint?
Yes.
Would JEA receive any of these Connect America funds?
We're not in the running for any of that, but I don't know if we were able to expand into our counties around us and be able to build. I think that would be definitely something we would consider if it was available again through the FCC.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions at this point? All right, seeing none, I believe next, and you all been very patient, but this has been very informative. Ken Webb, President and CEO of Cleveland Utilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Ken Webb. I serve as President, CEO of Cleveland Utilities. I've been in that role for a couple of years now. I've finished my 28th year with the utility recently. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today and briefly share with you where we are in Cleveland as it relates to providing fiber optic broadband services for our community. Let me begin by saying I do not come in an adversarial role toward anyone or any other interest in this room. I do, however, come representing a significant number of citizens who have come to realize access to reliable and reasonably priced high-speed internet is no longer a luxury. It is instead a necessity in our ordinary life today. It is a necessity in our education systems, our business and commerce functions, our medical services, our public service, and our community protection responsibilities and our economic development endeavors. Access to high-speed internet today is the electricity of the 1930s and 40s. I understand, appreciate, and respect the opinion some hold that this is a need that should be met by the private sector. However, broadband availability has become such a necessity, we need to address the issue sooner than later. In my mind, the public versus private enterprise debate has been settled since some private enterprise entities have accepted public money for their systems. In Cleveland, we are addressing the issue and are in the process of developing a plan that is modeled after the public power concept of service for customers in our electric service territory. The outcome of this process is still unknown at this time. What we do know is any proposal to provide service must meet several objectives. Number one, the service must be reliable. Number two, the service must be reasonably priced. Number three, the service must be backed by first-class customer service. Number four, the service must be based on sound financial principles. follow a business plan based on conservative estimates and assumptions, and the business plan does require state comptroller review before it is implemented. Number 5, the service must be available to all within our existing electric footprint when fully built. And number 6, the service must stand on its own financially, not be subsidized by other utility services. We are a multi-service utility in Cleveland providing electric, water, and wastewater services, and we take seriously our obligation to allocate joint costs between the different services we offer. These allocations are updated annually and submitted to TVA for approval before being implemented. I am hopeful that we will be able to achieve these objectives for the citizens of Cleveland and the surrounding area that our electric system serves. This brings me to the reason why I'm here today. You are well aware of the provision in state law prohibiting municipal electric utilities from providing certain broadband services outside their respective service territories or footprint. Although this in and of itself does not rule out Cleveland utilities providing broadband services, it does prohibit the cost sharing of resources and facilities between neighboring utilities. In Bradley and Hamilton counties, there are areas outside the service territory of both Cleveland Utilities and Chattanooga EPB. The areas are served by Volunteer Energy Cooperative. Access in some of these areas to reliable, reasonably priced, high-speed internet is limited or non-existent. However, this barrier in state law is preventing EPB from willingly serving portions of these areas. Should the barrier be removed, some residents stand to get world-class access to the internet within a few short months from EPB. EPB offers fiber optic broadband, and this technology not only benefits electric systems, communications, and smart grid capabilities, it virtually has no limit in its speed and additional communication capabilities. This platform is what our communities deserve as a path to meet current needs and into the future. As a safeguard, the bill proposed last year included a provision preventing a utility from entering a neighbor's footprint without a request from the utility doing so. The removal of the barrier would, in my opinion, open up a world of opportunities between utilities, with the ultimate winner being the citizens of our state. Cost savings could be significant, would be passed on to consumers, and all would benefit from the best practices of the others. Utilities have a long history of working together. We all remember the storms of April 2011. In Bradley County alone, 9 lives were lost to those storms. Our electric system incurred damages of approximately $2.7 million. Through our mutual aid agreements, we received restoration assistance from 12 other utilities. These utilities were from as far away as Kentucky and Florida. This is an example of the public power model at its finest. Helping and cooperating with each other is in the DNA of public power utilities. I respectfully ask you to allow us the opportunity to apply this spirit of cooperation to the broadband issue in Tennessee by recommending the current barrier in place between municipal utilities be eliminated. Thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Questions for Mr. Webb? Chairman Wargo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thanks for the patience. How long has Cleveland been offering these services?
We're not currently offering broadband services. We're in the process of looking at possibly doing so.
Okay, so Cleveland does not offer that service at this time?
That is correct. Our electric system was formed in 1939.
Do you feel that there's not enough services provided in Cleveland, service providers in Cleveland? What makes the city of Cleveland want to get into the business of providing broadband?
There are services provided in Cleveland. There are existing gaps in those services. This is something that a number of citizens have asked us to look at. They feel like this service being provided from the local level would offer them more than what we currently have.
Existing gaps in, and forgive me because I don't,
Sure.
I know where Cleveland is, but I don't know the particular county or whatever, but where the gaps in Cleveland, are they in what we would call rural areas?
Let me give you an example. I had a conversation with, he's a friend of mine. He's an attorney in Cleveland, in the grocery store parking lot 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's been in his current office in Cleveland since the early 90s. Only recently was he able to get Charter to expand their services to his office.
But they did expand.
They did, but his office is 1 block from the courthouse. It's one of the busiest corners in Cleveland.
Did he have a wireless service?
He had some service through another carrier, but it did not meet what he felt like he needed to operate his business.
Would it be a fair statement to say that, and I've heard this discussion today, 96% or whatever, we have those services, but it's kind of like a couple months ago when we talked about hotel, motel taxes, whatever, and as I remember when I first came up here, getting a room was $129 a night. I think the room rate this week, which I chose not to participate in, was $379. Would you say that them services are kind of like, well, I can get 10 meg, but boy, if I could have 25 meg, that would be much greater. It's not that the services aren't there. It's that you alluded to the fact that it's a luxury item, but not a luxury item. When you have a taste of something, if you go into your place of work or you go to Aunt Nellie's or Grandma's or whatever, and she has the 25 meg, but then I got to go home and I only got the 10 meg, would you say that is a driving force behind, maybe that's the reason why Cleveland wants to be involved into your citizens and are asking you to participate in this?
Well, certainly Cleveland wants to be able to offer its citizens and its businesses the absolute best that we possibly can. Because as long as there are others that are doing that, yes, we're competing with other areas, but we don't want to fall behind in Cleveland.
Would you say that you're able to provide for all the rural areas surrounding Cleveland and within your footprint that maybe some of these other gentlemen don't provide now?
I think our first obligation would be to serve what is within our footprint, and over a period of time.
So that would create a duplicate service?
Within the footprint, there's no question about it. There are other services already offered, but it would also offer some competition for those services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Rowland.
Tagging along, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tagging along with what Mr. Webb said, Chairman Morgan asked the question, what do I tell, and I was going to say this to everyone spoke, but what do I tell a major trucking company with 150 trucks across the state who is doing business with one provider, gets the weakest service they can provide, the business right behind him adjoining the lot gets the best service from the other provider, and the one providing the least service will not improve their service, and the one that could provide the better service does not come across the backyard to provide that. I don't know what to tell this man. I'm familiar with Mr. Brown, the attorney you talked about. Since 1991, 24 years it took him to get decent service in his office. The bank across the street had it since 91. The bank that adjoins his building had it since 1991. And I say that to say there are a lot of inconsistencies in providing service, and that's what bothers me, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then. Why don't we move right along? I know you've queued up. You've got your slides there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mike Knotts. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Tennessee Electric Cooperative Association, representing the 22 cooperatively owned and operated electric utilities here in the state. And we're a bit of an anomaly here in the room today because we are not broadband providers. State law restricts the ability that we have to provide retail broadband services. But we do feel that this is a very important issue, and we have some perspective on the issue we'd like to share with you. and want to be and feel we are well positioned to be excellent partners for solving this problem in the future. So quickly, electric cooperatives in the state, as you can see from the slide above you, we cover about 75% of the landmass of our state, serving approximately 2 million people. We're proud of the fact that our electric systems that string across the same rural areas that we're discussing today that have limits to the broadband services they receive, the electric services we provide are generally provided at 99.996% reliability. That's a very difficult task. When you look at the map, what you basically see are the large metropolitan areas that receive service from the large municipally owned electric utilities. Those are the areas that are not colored in addition to some very rural municipally owned utilities, particularly in West Tennessee, that have the characteristics that are more similar to co-ops, and that will come into play in just a moment. Electric co-ops, to be clear, are private nonprofit corporations. We are owned by the people we serve. We are not governmental entities. So as we get into some of this discussion about public versus private, I just want to point out that we are not a part of the us versus them in this discussion. We want to be clear that we have the ability to provide to help solve this problem without delving into some of the finger pointing that we hope to stay above in this room. In addition to not being a government entity, we are some of the largest taxpayers in the communities. I'm sure several of the mayors around the table know and appreciate the ad valorem tax payments that they receive from their local electric cooperative. And it's with all electric utilities, there's a difference in the way we operate. Universal service, providing our service to everyone who wants or requires it, is a part of the DNA of an electric utility. And so we are a universal service providers in rural areas, and service is absolutely our number one priority because we are owned by the people we serve. Broadband's important to us for a couple of reasons. One, electric systems need broadband themselves. The picture you see in front of you is a very simplistic drawing of what I call yesterday's electric grid. A very simple central station power plant that produces electricity in bulk. It's transmitted along big, long towers, received locally by your local electric utility, delivered along poles and wires to your home or business. That's a fairly simple model, and it's a model that served the United States extremely well. But that model is simplistic. And as technology is changing, so is the electric grid. With the simplistic model that you see before you, without the ability to have advanced telecommunications capabilities, we have problems that can come along that system. You're all familiar with the great blackout of 2003 that affected the Northeast. That large, dark area you see is a very, very large area of the Northeast that, if you all remember, suffered a cascading blackout. That blackout was caused by one tree that made contact with one transmission line in rural Pennsylvania, and then the outage cascaded along the electric system. By and large, that electric system was dumb. There was little connectivity between the pieces and parts of that electric system, and therefore they were unable to communicate with each other, and as an electric circuit does, when it overloads, it trips, and it cascades on and on. Tremendous economic impact to this country when that blackout occurred. But an instantaneous system of advanced telecommunications can provide for automation of the grid that helps prevent these types of problems. So co-ops themselves need broadband. Not only for that reason, this is what the electric grid will look like in the days to come. Much, much more complicated. Instead of one large central station power plant, you'll be seeing generation, the little small solar panels you see dotted all over this drawing, everywhere they go. This system that you see before you is absolutely impossible without advanced telecommunications capability. Generation occurs everywhere in this map. This system was designed to flow electricity essentially in one direction. And in the electric grid of the future, electricity moves in both directions, and that provides extra challenges. All these components are electrically connected, and they need instantaneous connectivity to stay on. It's clear to us that advanced telecommunications will be as important to the next 100 years of electric system operation as steam power was to the first 100 years. But more than the electric system itself, our members need broadband. And so I've got a great opportunity today. We've discussed a lot of technical terms, and I've because I believe pictures are worth 1,000 words, I'm going to show you some pictures that may help answer some of the questions that some of the panelists had earlier in the day. This map you see before you is a map of broadband availability in Tennessee. This map is based on the 25 meg download standard that is the coming standard that we believe as a association is a bare minimum for connectivity for a typical residential user. And what you see, I know it's a very busy map, but the electric cooperative areas are in the foreground and the non-electric cooperative served areas are somewhat blurred. But what you see are 3 colors of gray, green, and brown, and there's a map in a better version in the packet we handed out if you care to refer to it. The gray areas are areas that are presently adequately served. That means they receive broadband at 25 megs or greater on the download. Now, I want to make one quick side note before we dive too much deeper into this map. We heard from the table the only real reliable source for data on broadband availability is the National Broadband Map produced by the Department of Commerce. There's a significant limitation to that map. The maps and data that you receive from that system, we believe, are a best case scenario, and it's for this reason alone. If one location inside of a census block receives service at a certain level, the National Broadband Map reports the entire census block as receiving that service. So when you look at a map of geographic coverage or the numbers of population that those census blocks correspond to, that is a best case scenario. In actuality, the numbers are going to be lower. So what you see in the dark gray is essentially where Tennessee's large metropolitan areas and mid-sized towns exist. In those places, we see adequate service. But where you see green, those are underserved areas. Those are areas that can only receive service below 25 megs on the download. And the brown areas are those that receive no service, no wireline broadband service whatsoever.
Time out.
Sure.
While people are looking, I want to make sure we're all on the same page, literally and figuratively. So which packet and what page?
You have the proper one, and page 56 has the larger map, and the pages that precede it actually have the layers that make up this more complex map.
Thank you.
If you care to dive a little bit deeper. But I don't intend to get into the minute details of this map other than to demonstrate to you that there are significant geographic portions of the state that lack adequate connectivity based on the 25 meg standard. And by and large, those areas are the areas where electric cooperatives serve. So we hear from our members frequently about these problems. This lack of service is primarily in our co-op territories. Another potential way of looking at this from a geographic standpoint, and before I go there, I would just note that based on the 25 meg standard, over 1.1 million Tennesseans do not have access to 25 meg download internet. So based on that standard, the 25 meg standard, which is, as you heard earlier, where the FCC is going, where we believe we should be today, maybe not tomorrow, but today, 1.1 million.
Time out. I just because the baseline, not to quibble, but we were told that the baseline is 4.1, and that where the FCC is going is 10.1, and that in the future it would be 25.3. You're saying that the current standard really is 25.3?
Welcome to the FCC regulatory world.
Well, it's important for the...
Correct. You've not heard anything incorrect. What you have heard is the 4.1 standard is the definition of broadband. The 10.1 standard is the standard for funding decisions. So, for instance, the CAF2 program that you've heard about, funding will not be released for services that are below 10.1. And what the FCC has stated is that they are moving to a 25.3 standard. I believe I've characterized that fairly.
I'll jump in here. Senator Yarborough.
Could you just try to provide some sort of context for what that means in terms of like what's the 25? Like what can I do with 25 that I can't do with 10 that I can't do with 4? And I mean, is this like sort of Netflix? Is it running complex networks? What's the real world impact?
Frankly, I'm going to defer that question to some of the technical experts who are from that industry. Obviously, we all want additional speed. I don't think we have the time to delve into the issues of what constitutes that. Obviously, the more speed you have, the more you're able to do simultaneously. Speed is really a a euphemism for the amount of data you can download at one time. So the more data you require, like video streaming services, video conferencing services, requires greater bandwidth. And so the greater speed you have actually means the greater bandwidth you have. The more bandwidth you have, the more you can do at one time. I know that's not a complete answer to your question, but I don't feel I'm capable of answering it to your satisfaction. Perhaps another way of looking at this without dragging this out too long is we heard about the CAF2 funding. We've heard that several times. This is a map of where those census block locations are in the state of Tennessee. You'll notice, again, the bright green is the areas that are served by electric cooperatives. The light green are not. And I show this again for the fact that the primary problem that we see today of underserved communities takes place in electric cooperative areas, and we want to be a part of providing the future to our members. We think that some new models are potentially needed to be examined in the future. The number one, what you see as you study the maps we've provided a little bit closer, what you see the primary barrier to deployment, in our opinion, and this is based on 75 years of deploying wired networks in rural areas, is purely customer density. An investor-owned company, rightfully so, must go through an internal calculation based on their own required rates of return and how long they are willing to accept for payback on capital expenditures. And that's, God bless America. That's correct. But there is a model that we can examine, and that's the model of rural electrification that occurred in the 1930s. What basically happened, what cured the problem of rural electrification, was the ability to create nonprofit entities who were able to amortize those expenses over much, much longer periods. That was the very simple magic that took in less than 10 years, less than 10% of American farms being electrified to 100%. Not much more in the secret sauce other than that. So I would ask to the staff as well as the commission members to look at that model as a guide as you look at things that we could do that are slightly outside of what we've done in the past. And lastly, you heard a lot about pole attachments today. And we would argue today that you've heard that empirically those that pay pole attachment fees don't like paying them. And certainly I don't like paying bills myself. But what we see in the data is that we see very little actual correlation between broadband availability and pole attachment rates. And I'm going to quickly walk you through 3 examples. 3 states. I can't do a rate-by-rate analysis because if I provided individual pole attachment rates of individual companies, I'd potentially be colluding and be committing antitrust violations. So what we're going to do in place of that is use 3 different states, including Tennessee, as proxies for the 3 different regulatory models when it comes to pole attachments. First, we're going to look at Louisiana, which is referred to as a reverse preemption state. They have chosen as a state to enforce the federal guideline, the FCC rate that you heard Mr. Ferris refer to earlier, as their standard statewide. Every utility in the state, regardless of ownership, pays that rate. And what you see on the screen in front of you, the blue areas are underserved or unserved, and the gray areas are served. And what you see is about 74% of the state's population has access to adequate service. Now let's contrast that with a state that has a mixed bag of regulation. The state of Arkansas is a neighboring state, has a number of investor-owned electric utilities who are subject to the FCC regulations. They have a number of electric utilities that are primarily rural electric co-ops that are not subject to pole attachment regulation. What you see here with greater regulation of the pole attachment rate is that 50% of the population has adequate service and 50% does not. Now we compare that to Tennessee, where the state has no role in pole attachment regulation. And what you see is 82% of the population has access to 25 meg downloads. Again, this is not an exhaustive study, and we'll be happy to dig deeper with staff, but what we wanted to do was to give a tangible example of the fact that there is not immediate causation between regulation of pole attachment rates and existence of broadband. I would also encourage the members to read the memorandum that we've provided. There's an extensive discussion on this topic. I would hope this commission would not be sidetracked by that issue. And those are my comments. Thank you, sir.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman, Mayor Rowland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all of you for your comments. Been very interesting. Let me say to all of you, I have a flip phone. That's how knowledgeable I am of all this up and down and stuff like that. I have a TV set, and I have a computer at home, and I have an iPad as well. Inconsistencies. I want to get into that with some of the major carriers. But first of all, it's been alluded to by many people that maybe taxpayer money or ratepayer money shouldn't be gambled with for new investments in broadband. Hypothetically, what if Duke Power Company in 1931 said we're going to come to the Tennessee Valley and provide electricity to all the underserved and unserved areas in 10 or 15 or 20 years? But President Roosevelt thought differently, and TVA was established. And where would those areas be today without TVA? Thankful for that. As Mr. Webb alluded to wanting to do a partnership with EPB, to me, a partnership is an ideal relationship. As he mentioned, all the partnerships with utilities in other states as well as in Tennessee, when there's a need to come to the rescue and help of a fellow utility. So partnership does make sense. In Cleveland, we have two major providers, and we mentioned a couple of instances where the service has been very inconsistent. I don't want to get away from broadband too much, but I'll mention TV, cable. One of the providers provides cable service for our two local licensed TV stations. One of the providers does not provide cable for the one that gives me my local news in Cleveland. CAF money, is that being spent in the metropolitan areas or in rural areas or both? If you could, sir.
CAF 2, the areas are identified by the FCC, and they are in rural areas.
You're not spending more in Nashville than you are in
correct. They're designated
rural areas.
Right. Mike, and we can get the map also. Mike had the map up that shows the census blocks that are targeted for that.
It's page 60 of our memo.
Good. Thank you. Well, I think what we're all looking at is service to every Tennessean. And I asked you before, what do I tell people who ask me certain questions? What do I tell a lady, I believe is in Representative Carter's district, who runs a business out of her home, and she has to file her quarterly Tennessee Department of Revenue reports? She has to go to the library to do that. No service at all. Dial-up, worthless in her area, to my understanding. What do I tell the fifth grader who just got a laptop to take home to do homework on, because it seems like there are no more books anymore, and Mama says, take it back to the teacher. We can't use it. And the teacher says, well, we don't have those books in the library. You can't check anything out. How does that child do the homework? So I guess to say that there's so many inconsistencies with providers. And I think everyone's goal should be to provide the best service, top quality service to every resident of Tennessee. What do I tell an industrial prospect that's going into the industrial park where this one industry I mentioned earlier cannot get any service whatsoever worth bringing it out of the rain? And somebody wants to go in that park and they say, I'm not going to invest in your community because you've got no broadband, you've got nothing. But again, to say all that, I think the partnership between EPB and a local utility is the best way to go. You're not risking capital that has been alluded to by so many people, to not take that risk. But the partnership, just to me, makes more sense. We're ready for any comment.
Yeah, I'll be happy to comment, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I just like the mayor, and I'll be glad to provide this with you to you after the meeting. But these communities that have gone into this business have done very poorly. Covington Electric, that was allowed to go outside its service area, that was one of the pilots, failed. Comcast had to buy that system. I gave you some material on Memphis Networks in Memphis, $30 million that cost the taxpayers money, and they're all across the country. What I gave you is just a thumbnail of poor financial performance And, I think as public officials and stewards of the public money, we just need to be careful with that.
But some have been successful.
No, I don't know of
None
any.
at all?
I don't know of any. I don't know of a single one. I mean, I can give you the information since 2000, as of 2010. Now, I can bring it forward if you want me to. Jackson, the man here, $68 million in debt. $68 million in 2009 or 10. That's the latest report I have. I mean, I can give you all the
Do
information
you have
want.
any information on any partnerships that's been mentioned, like EPB and Cleveland Utilities?
Well, I think we would suggest that
this is new, I suppose.
I would suggest you ask the people in Hamilton County if they want to pay for something over in Cleveland, if that's how they want their taxpayer dollars spent. I mean, I'm just, it'd just be an off-the-cuff comment.
It's fine.
Cleveland Utilities can go into business right now if they want to. They can go into business right now. They think it's a good investment.
But wouldn't it be less risk in a partnership?
It's a much greater risk, Mayor, because you're going further. There are fewer customers. There's more cable laid. There's much more expense.
Make sure he's got the money.
What are we going to do to reach out to these people?
I'm not saying that there are not any solutions. The status quo should be maintained. But you've got, at the outset, we've got laws on the books for 16 years, 1999, 1997. The safeguards are not in place to protect the public on how, in our opinion, and I think these folks would say the same thing, how the government spends its money on going in and competing with private business. It's how you do it that's important. And I would say about your friend at the courthouse, in my community, if Comcast wants to get a permit to provide service to my house in Memphis or Germantown, Collierville, wherever you live, and it may be right there, they won't process a permit because I won't agree to pay X number of dollars a pole. So it doesn't just have to be in rural areas. It can be right in the middle of town like you're talking about.
So there are inconsistencies.
Those are inconsistencies. You're right. They're inconsistencies.
This is so much fun because traditionally we're prohibited from running debate, but just a little bit is kind of spicy. It's not your grandfather's TACIR anymore. Right. Now, if I may. Yes, look, 1 second, because Senator Yarborough was seeking recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ferris, you sort of brought up an issue about is this good for the taxpayers in Bradley County, Hamilton County? And I'm just sort of curious from your perspective and to hear the other side, frankly, why should that be decided? Why shouldn't that be decided by the taxpayers and voters in those areas as opposed to statewide? And why should we, as at the state level, deal with this issue?
Well, I think that before you allow additional expansion, given how these utilities have done, given how they've done, before you allow them further authority, you've got to look at the safeguards that are there. If you don't, quite honestly, they gave you Memphis Networks. I hate to bring it up, but once they went out of business, we found out that they weren't paying all of their fees that the private sector's paying. They're supposed to be paying, but they weren't paying. Franchise fees, taxes, all these things. So there are cross subsidies in place. I didn't talk about this because I don't want this to get into all that, but some of these communities have missed principal payments. When can you go and borrow $68 million and just not pay principal a year? Those are subsidies. They're illegal under the law right now, but nothing's happening. So we think that there needs to be a look at all that before additional authority is granted, and the government should remove the barriers that the private sector has.
Mr. Webb, is that right, Senator? Yeah. Mr. Rep, I know you had a comment, Mr. Webb.
In all fairness to my friend to my left here from Jackson, I need to tell you, I'm a certified public accountant. I've been a CPA since 1979. The existence of debt itself is not the determining factor. The determining factor is your ability to pay that debt back. And I know of no issue that Jackson has had with the payment of that debt. They've been successful in their system. AT&T operates with debt. I guess this is a little personal, but I have an AT&T bond in my brokerage account. So debt in and of itself is not really the issue. It's how you manage that debt.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Bickers.
Let me just comment before my questions say that I strongly believe that government ought to stay out of business, and we ought to encourage private investment and not make them compete with public dollars. But the internet seems to me to be a little different animal, broadband. I mean, I think there's no question but that the internet is today, and the demand for broadband is today, and the demand for your services exist because governments deferred sales tax dollars, for example, billions of dollars of them for a long time to give that industry a leg up. So the reality is I don't think you'd be where you were if government hadn't stepped in and said, we want to give this the entire industry and those who provide a break. So I'm struggling a little bit with why, having had the benefit of those deferred taxes or the benefit of direct payments, as we're talking about with AT&T, for example, why we should suddenly say hands-off competition. The other question, and I'll put this down and let you guys answer them, is I'm curious. In my short time recently, I've seen internet go from having one computer in your house with a dial-up modem with incredibly slow speeds to, in what seems a blink of the eye, to I can walk around my entire house with my phone and my iPad and order something from Amazon. And so when are we going to get the technology to have 25 gig broadband that doesn't require fiber, that doesn't require wired internet access, and shouldn't that be where we're going? So then we eliminate the issue on all of these pole attachments and the other things that are related to what may someday probably will be an antiquated technology.
On the money aspect,
Ferris to respond.
I'm sorry, I'm going to turn this over to. We have a cable industry doesn't receive government funding. We don't receive I think the funding that's been discussed here. So we don't have public funding. We think that there is robust competition, not really from these folks, but from those folks. Wireless, we think the private sector, there's a tremendous amount of competition. Now, how you get broadband in some of these areas, and whether you get them to all the areas in Tennessee, that's complicated. And to say it's not complicated, it is complicated because it would be going on. But there are a lot of things that y'all can do to improve what we have here today.
And I just want to second what Mr. Ferris said. I mean, this is a very competitive market that we are in, and there's nothing about these discussions, particularly related to municipal networks, that has anything to do with our lack of willingness to compete. We compete against multiple providers every day. It's a question of the government competing against private providers. And you were talking about wireless accessibility and expanding that. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, between 2007 and 2014, our wireless networks, the traffic across our wireless networks increased 100,000%. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's the market is showing every indication that traffic and that activity is going to continue to grow. Again, going back to connected cars, connected homes, John Deere tractors out in the fields are connected and they're reporting back, as far as maintenance is concerned, as far as, the appropriate nutrients that need to be in the ground in a certain area, 1 acre by another acre, that sort of thing. So connectivity is going to continue, and that's wireless connectivity. There's not a fiber optic line that's plugged into that tractor as it's going across the field. So I completely agree with you. Can't speak to, we don't know what the future holds, but investments are happening, like I said, $1.2 billion from AT&T between 2012 2014 to upgrade our networks and to make sure that we're providing the service that consumers demand.
Mike?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, if I can just add briefly from the perspective of the rural electric cooperatives, we do not consider wireless technology today to be a comparable product to wired broadband, but simply because it cannot provide the latency and the throughput, the full amount of bandwidth that a wired connection can. And what we're seeing in our industry is the need for near instantaneous connection, which requires very rapid latency. Now, what will the future hold with wireless technology? If any of us knew that, we probably wouldn't be sitting here. We'd be doing something else, and I'm hopeful that the technology will continue to improve. But based on where the technology is today, our focus is on wired networks.
I've got Senator Tracy, Chairman Wergo, and then Mayor Waters. Senator Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. I've been looking at this. We've talked about this for many years, and I agree with Mayor Rowland. There's some inconsistencies. My question would be, as legislators, we're going to have to make some decisions. If, to the private companies, let me ask this question, and then I'll ask the same question to the government entities. If you can be somewhat profitable as a company, in other words, when you're going into the rural areas, there's no question the rural folks need coverage. Is it more expensive to build out for you than it is in the municipalities where there's a concentration of homes or concentration of businesses? And I'll use an example. Let me just use an example. I'll almost answer the question for you. Being in the insurance business, and we have rural homes all over this state, it's much more expensive to insure a house in the rural areas than it wouldn't be in the municipalities. Why? Because the fire protection, it's going to take longer to get there, and if you have a fire in a rural area, you're going to have much more damage. So I'm trying to look at it as a business perspective. If a business cannot make it where it's profitable, I mean by profitable, you're just barely breaking even, versus why can a government entity make it happen?
Mr. Hayes,
both can answer that.
Sure. I can't speak to how a government entity can make that happen, but you're absolutely right. Sorry, I'm trying to keep this here. The characterization that it is higher cost to deploy services in rural areas is absolutely correct. And again, that leads to the creation of the Connect America Fund, which is collected by the FCC through charges on everybody's phone bill. And the strict purpose of that fund is to incent and supplement deployments to these high-cost areas.
Chairman Wergo.
Thank you, sir. I want to make a note that I'm from a rural area. Matter of fact, I know there's several mayors from the rural areas. Matter of fact, one of my mayors in my home county serves on this TACIR as well. And I think it's important that we do have the access. But one of my questions, and I'll do a follow-up behind that, is if Cleveland JEA, I just heard the $68 million, if it fails, who picks up the tab for that debt if it fails?
Sure. So there's a waterfall debt protections in that. It would first go back to our electric system to absorb that, and then the city, it would fall back to the city residents in an absolute worst case meltdown of a failure. But let me say, I would like to add a point that $68 million, I believe the report's 5 years old now. I'd be glad to share our financials and walk through those with everyone. And in the report, which are publicly, available because we do comptroller, we do audit reports, and we've been able to pay off millions of dollars since that time. For an industry that makes $6 billion, just the one company, you'd think they'd be able to get a new report after 5 years since the last one done by the University of Denver.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
Which alludes to, so at the end it's going to come to the ratepayers, and that's where my concerns are. And here's where I have, because I want to see it happen, but I want to make sure we do it right, because here's two things. We have a state parks in my district, which I'm very proud of, which has a beautiful golf course. But we have two other golf courses right next to it, neighboring, that is struggling to survive. Because it has to compete with that state park. But then I get complaints from my constituents saying, why is the state park going up on my rates at the golf course? Well, if they want to go play the other golf courses, which them privately owned golf courses need the funding, they can't put the chemicals and the fungicides and all the other stuff that they need, because it's not the taxpayers' dollars that they're being able to be funded. They got to base on their membership and privatization, which sends me back to one other point. In the little town of Henry, we've had a disaster with water and sewer. We have constituents now that have to make up that bill because of the disaster that's happened, and they were paying $29 and $30 for their water bills, and now their water bills are $105 to $115. This is an issue. There's many moving parts, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad that we are studying this, but I ask that we go very cautiously so we don't end up like some of the incidents that we've had that I've alluded to earlier, and we end up costing constituents that they want something, they feel that they need it, but at the end, they could be dissatisfied. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Wirgo. Mayor Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. You all may have answered this and I missed it, but when it comes to the federal subsidies, when I look at the map of the census blocks that those subsidies would be available in, and then I look at the map that shows where broadband is not there, they certainly are not the same. So is that money made available based upon census data, the number of residents, or what kind of criteria does the federal government set when you get the money?
If I may, and this again goes back to the discussion at the beginning about the speeds, and I don't have the maps in front of me, but I think you're referring to the maps that Mike provided. The availability map that he provided is based on the FCC's target speed of 25 megabit per second downloads. CAF2 funding is based on 10 megabit per second downloads. So those are two different flavors that we're talking about here. So the maps are going to be different. Even if in the national broadband map, their data breaks it down at 4 megabit per second download. It's, I think the number, both wired and wireless connectivity, is 99.7% of Tennesseans. At 10 megabit upload, the number is something like 99.1% of Tennesseans have access to that. So that's the number that the CAF funding reflects, is addressing the wired connections or the fixed connections at 10.1. So that's why there are differences in the maps. The one, the access reflects 25 megabit, CAF reflects 10 megabit. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question, but I'm still a little bit confused because there's areas obviously in the state that doesn't meet that criteria, and they're not, if this map is correct, I don't see them colored in as their census blocks would be available for that federal money. And so if that's the criteria, I'm wondering why there's not more areas in the state where that federal money would be available. I don't understand the correlation there.
I mean, and again, it's identified and defined by the FCC. The location.
That probably answers my question right there.
There you go. Yeah, It may all become clear in the fullness of time. In the interest of time, we have our next panel is made up of communities and broadband users. What I'd like to do is take a 10-minute recess before we do that, give them a chance to change out, and give everybody a breather here. So we'll stand in recess till 3:35. Well, I know everybody's online checking the internet, but if you could return to the hearing room, we're going to get back underway. Among other panelists today, Amy New will be presenting on behalf of the Department of Economic and Community Development, answering many of the questions that have been raised today. All right, we'll come back to order now as we proceed to hear from our next group of panelists on behalf of communities and broadband users. I will mention here at the top that we are likely not to get to tab 4 today. I don't know if we have anybody else in the audience here who is here just for that. But we'll take it up when we reconvene, I think, tomorrow, because we want to give this panel the same consideration we gave the first panel. And having said that, I yield.
Thank you, Chairman. So our second panel on behalf of broadband users and community needs includes the following panelists. We have Amy New, the Assistant Commissioner of Rural Development for the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. Cliff Lloyd, Chief Information Officer for the Tennessee Department of Education. Steve Mallard, Computer Information Technology Master Instructor at the Tennessee College of Applied Technology, Shelbyville. Sergeant Aaron Ehlert, Tennessee Highway Patrol, Department of Safety and Homeland Security. Sean Lawson, Mayor of Hickman County. And Radonna Rose, Executive Vice President for Tennessee Farm Bureau.
Thank you, and we'll take you in the order listed. Ms. New, Commissioner New, thank you for being with us. You might have to use the other. I think there was a...
Okay, thank you, Chairman and committee members, for having us. As you all have heard today from all the other panelists and the questions that you all have asked, that broadband is inevitably connected and tied to economic development. As they introduced me, I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Rural Development with the Department of Economic and Community Development. And we know that communities, from the ones that we speak with, their main conversations, the things that we hear over and over, and everyone in this room hears all the time, that they want reliable and affordable high-speed internet or broadband. And in some instances, on behalf of ECD, we hear that it's also an understanding of what all types of broadband is available and what types of high speed, because there are different versions. When I was first appointed as Rural Development Assistant Commissioner in February of this year, I went out on the road and went to 21 different communities. Well, actually, it was regional visits, 21 different sessions, and actually about half of you sitting in here were actually at my sessions. We had a little over 250 mayors, economic developers, legislators who attended these sessions, and you too heard the same things. That, and I'm not even, actually I had this whole thing written out, and I was so excited, and you all pretty much stole my thunder, and I've already talked about everything I have written today, so I won't go into too much depth with it, but I mean, broadband is a constant topic in economic development. Communities recognize the importance, like I said, of how important it is, and also the obstacles that they're facing with being able to purchase it. And some of those actually have all of my listening tour notes here today from all of those 21 sessions that I'm happy to send to you all and let you see it. We had counties who said that they struggled to land an industrial prospect into their industrial park because there wasn't fiber there, or that the prospect couldn't afford to hook the fiber up. We've heard that in some counties there's a lack of service that's prohibited to high cost. And some of our West Tennessee communities cited that there was they needed assistance with that last mile on some of the farms. There's limits placed to some of our communities with being able to have in rural areas call centers, because call centers rely on high-speed internet and a larger capacity of the upload and download speeds. As well, in one county in particular, we had spent some money through the 3-star grants that we had in putting a digital hub into the community to train mothers or veterans to be able to work from home. Not just, these are $15 to $20 an hour jobs where they could go home and work and take prescriptions for Walgreens or CVS or orders from Pizza Hut. We trained nearly 40 people the first year, and only 2 of those 40 could actually work from home because that's all the internet speeds that they had. The other 38 could not work from home. So things like this is what we're hearing. And again, ECD, we are agnostic to who's going to serve it, how they're going to get it. We just want to make sure that in some way they're getting it. And just a personal note, I'm from Monterey. I don't know if anyone in here knows where Monterey is. I hope you do. I grew up on a hog and tobacco farm, and I went to Tennessee Tech. I had to go to the Dairy Queen to check my grades, and then I had to drive all the way to Cookeville just to actually submit papers online. And this is in Monterey. So my brother, fast forward about 12 years, my brother was just complaining recently that he had to go to the library still today because our internet on the farm is not fast enough to be able to submit his homework. So, I mean, it's things like that that, you know, sometimes we say it's great to have it, but it's a necessity for our students, our businesses, our downtowns, our main streets. In addition to our listening tour, we heard people say that, you know, broadband, about 20% of the people that we talked with and through our survey said that broadband was more difficult, or was the most difficult need to meet in their community over site development, over community development, over health, over transportation. They said broadband. 20% of those said this. And again, I don't have to go over this. It provides jobs. It keeps sites in the game for industrial recruitment. Employees in rural communities can work from home. Patients can receive actual medical assistance from their homes now. So with that said, with ECD, we really are we're trying to assist our communities. And last week, I don't know who all in here was at the governor's conference, but Commissioner Boyd stressed the fact that we have to be Team Tennessee. We have to all work together, and in some way, whatever we need to do, we need to make it happen. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the commissioner? I have one question, and that is to Commissioner Boyd's announcement last week. Among other things, the study that the department is commissioning, I think it's a $250,000 study. Tell us about that, if you would, and how that money's going to be spent.
Okay, well, let's prepare for that question. And this, again, this is on behalf of the department is contracting with this consultant. But again, I stress the fact of being Team Tennessee. It's not just ECD that's doing this survey. It's the entire state. We're all working together to get this information. But really, it's to have a clear picture of broadband, because I talked about going into those communities, and a lot of them said, you know, well, we don't have any providers. Well, we sat down and we looked and we said, well, actually, you have one provider here. And we kind of, it's a understanding the facts of what actually is out there is very important, and actually defining what broadband looks like in Tennessee is important. And I know that with the TACIR study, we're doing much of that, and also getting all of the right people to the table to have those conversations is so important. And that's how we plan to complement the TACIR study in doing that. But from that, developing strategies to address the gaps in access and utilization across the state, so that we do have a clear picture of what actually is there and who's using it, what the penetration is. And then we'll be conducting a supply and demand analysis, looking for both access to the high-speed internet and broadband, and also the use of the internet that grows those businesses, improves health and education for those areas. And in November, we'll be doing a broadband access study assessment through our consultants. It's S&G and NEO Fiber. And we're encouraging all companies and residents to take this assessment.
Chairman Wergo and then Senator Yarbrough.
Hey, Ms. New, you said that not just ECD but all of Tennessee. Can you elaborate a little bit? Who's all involved on this study?
Well, actually, we're just starting it. So we haven't even, we're working through the contracting phase right now.
So you're just in the building phase
yes.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an estimated time frame of when you think that this study from your department, your side, do you have a goal in mind of when this study should be done?
Absolutely. All the reporting is to be handed over to you all by the end of February. So this is to assist the legislature as well in the information that you all will receive with the TACIR study.
And you believe that will complement this study on top of that?
Yes. We sat down with
even
TACIR.
though you don't have your pieces in place just yet?
Yes, through the scopes and the process of.
So we have an estimated time by the end of
February with our e-strategies report. And then NEO Fiber will also look at other states and what they've done based off what information that we gain from this, and see what other states have done. That'll be another part of it that we'll hand over in March, to say this is what other states have done. These are some best practices, and these are some ways that they went about paying for it, and or that ways that they were able to assist communities and providers.
Not asking you to speak for the administration, but maybe I guess I am. I guess my question is, with bill filing deadline being in first part of January, maybe the end of January, is it a fair assessment to say that the administration would feel more comfortable with the process about any legislation until this study is complete?
And I cannot speak on behalf of the administration to that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to recognize Senator Yarborough, but Senator Bowling has joined us, and I just wanted to welcome her and also reiterate, because she and I have had some correspondence, that nothing TACIR is doing is designed or intended in any way to interfere with legislation she has pending. And as I've said, I've sort of pled my case. I don't think I've convinced her, but that, you know, no good deed goes unpunished. I think a lot of the testimony we've had here today is very enlightening in a supportive way of her efforts. But timing being what it is you raise a point about the administration study. That's not something we anticipated when we announced TACIR's study, and I welcome all comers, but that's a different component. Senator Yarborough.
I'm sort of curious from an economic development perspective, when you say high-speed internet, like what speed constitutes high speed from your, you know, as we're thinking about building out an infrastructure and long-term goals for the state, what, I mean, we've heard lots of different numbers thrown around today, which I don't think I know what all of them mean, but there's a significant difference between sort of the internet power that it would take to run Representative Parkinson's Twitter account versus, you know, sort of, though that would be significant, and sort of, you know, a full business that's downloading X-rays or whatever. So
okay, thank you for asking that. And that's another thing that our consultants will be doing, is finding out what businesses their needs are. So it varies.
So
really varies.
you don't have
No,
an
we have no
assessment right
data.
now of what that is.
No, sir.
Did I have another seeking recognition? Yes, I'm sorry, Mayor Rowland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner New, you said 2 out of 40 at-home workers were the only ones who could compete or stay in that workplace.
Yes, sir.
Because of lack of internet.
Lack of internet, or they couldn't afford it.
Wow. Also, Mr. Chairman, Representative Howell's here, and that echoes some of the issues he's raised in his district as well. The one that we talked about earlier with Representative Carter, where you just can't do anything in some areas at all. Can't even file your Tennessee revenue reports unless you go to the library. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You can ask Commissioner Roberts about that. No, just kidding. I hadn't asked you, but I believe you referred to one of the vendors with whom you've contracted. Who all is being used in your study, if you know?
S&G Consultants, S&G Networking Group, and NEO Fiber. And we actually went through a very thorough process in finding out which ones we wanted to use, because we too wanted to be as agnostic as possible and come in not knowing all the answers, really just finding them out. So we contacted 11 states and had long conversations with them about what they had done. And these are states that are, you know, they're ahead of the curve when it comes to broadband. And we sit down and talked with them about what they were doing, how they went about it. Did they hire a consultant? I will tell you, every single one of them said, you will not get anywhere if you do not hire an outsider to come in and do some of this. So that is one thing that was consistent across each of those 11 states. And I'm happy to share any of those notes as well. We have notes from all those meetings. And the most consistent ones that were not just a cookie cutter process, that were tailored to what that state needed, S&G was the best person. And so we actually talked with 7 different consultants, and these were the 2. We couldn't decide just on one, because one was better in one area and another was better in the supply side. So that's how we settled on 2 consultants.
Mayor Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner New, let me ask you, can fast track money, ECD fast track money, or either the new rural development money that the Commissioner Boyd announced at the Governor's Conference, any of those dollars be used to help provide, for example, a fiber optic backbone to a prospective industry that's looking at locating? If you've got really a fish on the hook, so to speak, do you know if that fast track money or the other money would cover that?
Yeah, Mayor, the fast track money it could be like an infrastructure if there's an actual prospect locating on that site. But the Rural Development Fund, it's not, there's no specific money to be able to help communities get started or provide it to build out a network or a backbone besides the broadband study. But in addition, I know that we rolled out the $6 million site development grant program. We're all very excited to have done that. But if there is a site that one thing that's keeping them, like a call center park or something like that, if they need broadband upgrades, this site development grant money could provide that, because it is to provide infrastructure to build that site up to make it ready for job placement. So I hope that answers your question.
Further questions for the Commissioner? All right, seeing none, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Mayor Crossley, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question about, throughout the state, are all of the county libraries on some type of broadband? Is that available throughout the state, or we don't even have that? Does anyone know?
I don't know if we have.
We should probably ask the
anyone
Secretary of
here.
State.
That's a question to be answered.
I know we just keep talking about they have to go to the library. Maybe even the library wouldn't have those facilities in some counties. So I'd like for us to check that out.
As Amy said, the Dairy Queen.
Yeah, or Dairy Queen.
Exactly. Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope you all go to Dairy Queen in Monterey. It's got good twin burgers.
All right. From the Department of Education, Chief Information Officer Cliff Lloyd. Mr. Lloyd, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners,
Thank you for the opportunity to share a perspective from K-12 education in this important discussion. If you haven't already, you're going to hear about an initiative from the department called TN Ready. And TN Ready is our online assessment initiative. It's the big stakes exam that we're going to administer twice a year. It's the replacement for a system that you may have heard of called TCAP. In readiness for TN Ready, we did a readiness survey of all of our districts. This was a very useful body of data as it gave us a sense of speeds, performance, connectivity, devices, readiness for our schools and districts to be online. I believe that survey would be available to this commission, so that may be a useful set of inputs. It would give you a very good cross-section of what our schools look like. You know, as I listen to discussions about broadband, invariably schools are always brought into the discussion. What I seldom ever hear, though, is why. What are we actually trying to accomplish with broadband in schools? What are the drivers? Let me talk to you a little bit about what's really driving broadband adoption in schools today, but more so, I want to talk to you about what's just around the corner, because it's about to get interesting, and I think not necessarily interesting in a good way. I think the noise levels that we're hearing from schools today being relatively low, I think is a little bit deceptive. And I think that it's deceptive because of the limited drivers for the need for broadband in a school today. But that's about to change. So let me just start out just by sharing the landscape with you today around broadband in K-12 education. So it goes without saying, the biggest driver initially was simply staff having email and connectivity to the internet. That was really it. And honestly, as we talk about speeds and connectivity, we've had more than enough connectivity in schools to provide that basic facility for a long time. There's been no real driver to do better. Things like online assessment. And by the way, Tennessee is amongst a small number of states who are really starting to lead the nation in moving to 100% compliance with online assessment. So this is a big deal. There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of money going into online assessment, and it is driving a lot of readiness and a lot of broadband awareness in our schools to a level that's never existed before. The typical use of broadband in a school beyond online assessment is this idea of labs. And I'm not sure if you've ever really seen a lab. A lab is a room with maybe 30, 35 machines available in it, and the kids rotate through. When you're talking about an entire district or an entire school community, the percentage of kids at any given time who are online is incredibly low. There is not a lot of pressure on broadband in schools today, but that is truly about to change, and let's talk a little bit about that in just a minute. I believe it may be interesting for you to know how schools go about acquiring broadband today and how it works. A number of states actually have private networks supporting K-12 education. In Tennessee, we don't. We rely almost exclusively on the carriers and service providers for connectivity. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does bring with it some dimensions and dynamics that we have to be aware of. The primary consideration for our districts is the cost of the broadband. I think we heard from the previous panel that there is actually plenty of bandwidth available. In fact, in reality, most carriers are actually artificially throttling the speed into buildings. They do it with rules in the router. You buy subscriptions, they enable a certain amount of bandwidth. It's typically not the amount of bandwidth that's physically available in the street is generally not the limiting factor. It's the amount the customer is willing, or in education, able to purchase. In Tennessee, we spend about $96 million a year on internet connectivity across all of our schools. The only way we're able to do that is through a federal program called E-Rate. And E-Rate is a federal initiative regulated by, there's a word I'm looking for, regulated by the FCC and administered by an organization called USAC. E-rate in Tennessee provides 86% of our funding. I'm doing the math real quick in my head, but it's something in the order of about $65 million each year supports internet in our schools through E-rate. In other words, without E-rate, we would not be able to provide broadband into almost every district in Tennessee. It would simply be a prohibitive cost burden. I think an important data point is to realize that the E-rate program has been extremely difficult for the last 12 months. Here in Tennessee, and let me just take a step back, the way E-rate is paid is E-rate represents a discount off the carrier's bill. So if a carrier says the cost of my service is $100, then the invoice for $100 is submitted. USAC funds the 86% of it. The district only ever funds the difference between the USAC between the E-rate discount and the total cost. In order to obtain that discount, our districts must form what's called consortia, buying consortia. They have to go through the process of issuing an RFP, they have to go through a competitive bid process, and they have to award one of the carriers the contract. Once they've done that, they're then able to procure services. In the last 12 months, every consortia in Tennessee has come under an audit from USAC. In most cases, that has resulted in a suspension of funding to our districts. Today, there is a consortia that is linked to Sweetwater that is resulting in 47 of our districts not receiving E-rate funding in this year. Moving forward to next year, when consortias come up for renew, there is the potential for even more districts to lose funding. So this is a concerning development for the department, and we're taking serious action right now to pull E-rate back in-house and get back on the good list, so to speak, with USAC and the administration of E-rate.
If we may interrupt, I apologize,
Yeah.
but this is important enough. I know that several members have questions.
Yeah,
this
sure.
issue. Representative Parkinson, you're
Yep. Let me pause and take
I
those questions.
and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't want you to get too far in. We were over here huddling up over here. Two questions. The first question I had was, are we ready for the TN Ready assessment in regards to broadband in all of our schools across the state?
The answer is yes. We have done a lot of work to test the system, to test the service, and to assess the readiness of our schools at multiple levels. Can we guarantee it to be 100% seamless and without glitch? Would be hard, right? It would be hard to make that guarantee. In general, all the indicators, all the tests we're performing suggests that the types of problems we're going to run into have now been identified, and there are appropriate programs in place to correct those problems. We most definitely ran into issues. The biggest issue we ran into was the problem of scale. It's this challenge of what if a million kids all do it on the same day versus spreading it out. So you've really got to engineer for worst case examples. So we've run some pretty high level stress tests where we artificially loaded up the system to something like 8 times the expected volume to see what would happen. And guess what? It broke. But from the breakage, we then learnt what all the potential choke points were, and we've been able to work through most of them. So confidence level very high is the way I would put that we'll move through this period without difficulty.
Okay, and thank you for that. And the second question, I think most of us want to know: how do we get basically booted out of the system in regards to the E-rate?
Yeah, it's a long discussion, the E-rate problem. Let me try and summarize it as best as I can. There are some very strict guidelines around the process for bidding and for going about issuing the RFP and awarding a vendor. E-rate is, and I don't know if anyone has seen it or had any experience with it, E-rate is incredibly complex. In Tennessee, the culture and the history have been that the districts have largely chosen to go alone. And there's a history and there's a reason why districts have wanted to own this themselves. The problem is there is a mismatch between the capacity of a district to complete the level of documentation, the detail needed to complete this application, which is called a 470. You may have heard that. You may have heard that term. What this has led to over time is a lot of districts relying heavily on trusted advisors to come in and help them build their RFP. In some cases, those trusted advisors have been carriers and have been the people actually providing the service. Over time, the FCC has become aware of potential vendor involvement in writing an RFP. And as you guys will know, a vendor cannot participate in the writing of an RFP. It's one of the fundamentals of a competitive bid process. So we have found ourselves, if not in reality, with the perception, and of course perception can be reality, that there is undue vendor influence in our RFPs, and that has put a very significant spotlight on the state's consortia. The strategy that the department is taking to fix this is we have gone to districts and we've said we would like to help. We think that this is too big a burden for the districts. Let the department shoulder this. Let the department run the competitive bid process. And we have a strategy that we believe will hold us in good stead moving forward. It doesn't unfortunately help the districts this year who've lost up to $12 million in funding this year. But we believe we have a strategy moving forward.
Senator Yarbrough, did you have a question? All right. So to be clear, the E-rate gap is a phenomenon in and of itself. The result of losing the funding may result in limited access, but it wasn't the lack of access in the first instance. It's a separate problem.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So if I can just sort of conclude the first part of what I was saying, I think the message I would like to communicate is that the pressure on broadband, it's largely driven by drivers in the district. There's got to be events that drive it. Just saying we need more and more broadband in our schools without the strategy for how it's going to be used and the difference it's going to make, it's not meaningful. To talk about, well, what speed have we got per student? What size pipe have we got running into the district? Unless you're assessing that information relative to the device ratios, the types of programs going on in the district, it's a meaningful number, meaningless number rather. I want to touch on a couple of things. Throughout the earlier panel, we talked a lot about speeds, down and up. Let me share a perspective with you. In the retail market, we care a lot about downstream, right? We want to stream the latest high-def movie. We want to stream our music. We want to do all of this. And we don't care terribly much about what we upload. Typically, our upload is maybe a Twitter post and updating our status on Facebook, and there's not a lot. In education, it's a very different story. The problem of the homework that wouldn't submit from the farm, I guarantee you had more than enough download speed. You could probably watch a movie, but you couldn't submit upstream. What we need to strive for is called symmetrical bandwidth, right? Symmetrical bandwidth is a concept that says the up speed is the same as the down speed, and typically carriers don't like to provide symmetrical bandwidth. In commercial applications, in education applications, we care a lot about upstream. The simple analogy I'll give you is you're on a long-distance call with someone. The person on the other end is hearing you in real time. You're hearing them 15 seconds later. Makes for a very difficult discussion if you don't have the same speed up as the same speed down. So let's push for that. So I think my message is that today we're okay. There isn't enormous pressure relative to how broadband is being used in schools today. But let's talk about what's just around the corner. So we talked about the dreadful acronyms in IT, and let me avoid using them and getting into more jargon. But in the late 2000s, from sort of 2005 onwards, we were introduced to a new term, or at least an old term got repurposed, and we learnt about the cloud. So the cloud no longer refers to these fluffy white things up in the sky. They're now this mysterious, nebulous morass of compute where all of our information and data resides. But I have to tell you that the cloud was more than a gimmick. It was more than a fad. The cloud has led to a paradigm shift in the way we consume information, the way we buy software, the way we install software, the way data moves. And let me tell you why this is significant in education. Because in the next few years, every cohort in Tennessee, so every grade level, every class in Tennessee is going to be a cloud native. Forget about digital native, right? They're already that. They're going to be a cloud native. And let me tell you, they see the world differently to you and I. The paradigm shift that we're dealing with to how we sort of try to rethink use of the internet, use of the cloud, this is just normal to these kids. And I'll tell you, if we are still giving them backpacks full of books, if we are still adopting traditional teaching methods, if our approach is, hey, you're going to have 2 hours of lab time per week, you're going to see a level of disenfranchised kids like we've never seen before. So we have to adapt very, very quickly. And part of that adapting is going to mean that we're about to come under enormous pressure for bandwidth. It's not going to be about how do you power assessments twice a year or how do you run a lab with 30 PCs. It's going to be about how is every student connected in real time with one-to-one computing, and that is going to be a whole new game. So in terms of the purpose of this commission, we're definitely not behind the curve, but I will tell you we're not ahead of it. So the timing, I think, is very good. As we think about some considerations around this, I want us to be conscious of the fact that broadband by itself is worthless. You can double broadband in every school in the state right now, and I'll go out on a limb and tell you it won't make one iota of difference in the classroom or to educational outcomes. As you talk about broadband, you've got to talk about devices. You've also got to talk about how we move to one-to-one computing in our classroom. If you're going to talk about increasing the number of devices in a district, you'd better also be talking about networking and technology inside the school to support all of those devices. If you've now got every kid in your school holding a device, you'd better figure out how to retrain the educators on now how to take advantage of that sort of technology. And if you're truly going to see benefit from that technology, we'd better figure out how to shift the needle from paper-based textbooks into digital content. So I think the timing is great. I really applaud this commission and its effort to make broadband equitable. I think the noise levels in education are going to get much louder very quickly, and I think that the timing is really right for us to now plan for the future. I don't think we're behind the curve today, but I don't think that statement will be true 5 years from now unless we make some important strategic investments. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sir, also. I just, I'm not the expert in IT as you are, not nearly. I operate an Android and an old iPad, but our children are coming out of the womb being able to operate these devices, and so I just slightly, let me rephrase. I don't disagree with you, but I'm more cautious of your statement that we're not behind, that we're kind of at par position in regards to this. But in our new information age, things change every second.
Yeah.
And so I think since your statement that we weren't behind, we've probably gotten behind since you made the statement.
Yeah. Let me qualify that a little bit, because I do agree with you in what you're saying. I think in terms of pressure on broadband, so the size of pipes that typically run into our schools today, there are not activities in the school today that is suggesting those pipes are too small. That's what I mean, right? But that is about to change. The size of pipes into our schools, the need for a much bigger pipe is going to change very, very dramatically. That's what I meant by that statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for bearing with me. And I had a 5-hour energy drink, so you can blame it on that. And thank you for that again. And it raises another point, for us to be cognizant of with this body, that remember we're not competing with other states anymore. We're competing with Japan, China, and other countries globally in the race to make sure our children are optimally being educated, and so we have to keep that in mind. And if they're doing it in other countries already right now, then I think that we need to be cognizant of that and get on board.
May I share a quick statistic with you? Prior to joining the department, I actually worked for Microsoft for 10 years in Redmond. 76% of all new hires in Microsoft do not come from the United States.
We're going to offer you up as a candidate for the next TED Talk. Mayor Bickers.
Mr. Lloyd, I will tell you, it was surprising for me to hear from the Department of Education that we don't have bottlenecks at the school level, because that's not what I'm hearing at the school level. What I'm hearing is that the state mandates children take tests online and that we can only have 5 take them at a time, because we say, why is that? And we're told, well, because they don't have fiber running to the school. And if they get more than 5, they get tremendous lag, and it's not doable.
Yep.
So it surprised me to hear you say that we don't have issues at the local level, and it concerns me greatly when you describe the greater demand we're going to have, when at least I can't speak for anywhere but our schools. We do have an issue.
Right.
And we also had, somehow we got hung up in this E-rate, and suddenly they announced that we're going to have to begin eliminating broadband for the schools that can have it, because we got this big bill because somebody else in the consortium, who was in charge, I guess, of putting together the RFP may not have done it just right. So now the schools get this great big bill.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, the state qualified for an awfully big grant called Race to the Top.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we use some of that money and dedicate it to trying to, instead of relying on what appear to be difficult situations and a process with the E-rates and others that clearly has implementation problems, why can't the state just step up and say, we believe education is one of the strongest tools we can give to prepare a child for success. We know we've got to give them, one of the greatest tools we can give them is access to information, so let's make it available at the state level and do what we got to do as the state of Tennessee to see that it happens, instead of kicking it back to the districts and saying, we'll help you with this paperwork. I'm just curious, why don't we just go ahead and bite the bullet and say, let's use this money that we have to bring all of our children, give all of them access to this important tool for a successful life.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a great observation, and there's a couple of points there. So let me respond to them, if I may. You talked about the bottleneck problem, and this is something that I think is not well understood as we talk about things like online testing. The important thing to understand, there's many moving parts between a student at a laptop and the assessment being recorded in a database in a data center a long way away. The bottlenecks that many of our schools are reporting are actually not related to the size of the pipe. So this is specifically a bandwidth discussion. In most cases, the problem actually relates to the infrastructure inside the school. Now, I'm not for a minute suggesting that's not a problem. It absolutely is, but you can't merge it with a broadband discussion, because the wireless infrastructure inside a school, which is typically being swamped when many kids attempt to connect to the same wireless access point, is by and large the reason for limited bandwidth. Now, not the actual pipe running into the school. So when we did testing for online assessment, we put instrumentation in all of those hops, and we were able to see very clearly that in fact in no case was the actual broadband flooded. The bottlenecks were elsewhere. So I'm not for a minute suggesting we don't have problems to solve, but through the lens of a broadband discussion, broadband wasn't the problem for those bottlenecks. Let me talk a little bit about race to the top money. I will tell you I've been in the role for 4 months. That's not an excuse, but I wasn't here for the period of race to the top. So I don't know all of the ways that it was used. I will tell you that Tennessee received $500 million in race to the top money. That money did expire on the 30th of June of this year. So as we stand today, that money is gone, the race to the top money. The department did not receive all of that money for its own projects. In fact, most of that money actually went to districts for individual projects that were approved by USAID. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what all of those projects were. A lot of them related to laptop programs, online learning initiatives, and the like. I will tell you that the state spent approximately $9 million of that to build what has become the fastest real-time data network of any state in the country, and I'm saying that with a lot of pride. We have implemented the real-time connectivity so far of 102 districts. By February of next year, we will have every school in the state integrated in real time. So I'm not sure if you've had much experience with state reporting. It's a pretty old, you have, Commissioner. Yeah, we are this close to completely eliminating manual state reporting. And I can tell you when I talk to superintendents at conferences, that gets a cheer, the fact that that's going to go away. So we did make some very valuable strategic investments in technology. You know, your question, could that money have been used to roll out a private network? The answer is yes. You know, it could have, and let me put a little bit of sort of texture around that discussion. The FCC right now is offering some very significant benefits to states. In fact, they're doing a roadshow right now talking to states about putting in a private network to connect K-12 institutions. And the reason they're doing it is they're concerned about the escalating cost of the traditional model of using a telco. But here's the problem. What they're not allowing for is, firstly, the states don't want to get into the business of managing complex networks. It is a non-trivial business to build a network operations center that is capable of running a whole state. We actually want the carriers to do that for us. The other thing that the one-off grants are not addressing is the ongoing cost of maintaining the state network. You know, we feel more encouraged by discussions around competition between the vendors, municipalities doing great work. I can, you know, this is purely subjective, but I can tell you that some of the districts where municipalities have participated, such as Jackson, are amongst the districts who regularly demonstrate better readiness for online initiatives.
Your wealth of knowledge and information, I really appreciate your input, and I think we'll be staff will probably be occupying more of your time if you'll give it later.
Would love to.
Thank you very much.
It's a hard problem. We're very passionate about solving it.
Well, your wealth of information, and I appreciate it very much. Without more then, let's go on to our next presenter, Mr. Steve Mallard, Computer Information Technology Master Instructor at the TCAT of Shelbyville.
It's a pleasure to be before you guys today. My boss kind of said that, hey, Senator Norris is going to be there with 3 or 4 other guys. This is the truth. In a room answering questions, and so a few folks there. But anyway, I want to tell you a little bit about the Tennessee College of Applied Technology and our entire system. In 1964, 2 great things happened. The Tennessee College of Applied Technology at Shelbyville was born, and so was I. Well, with that said, we're more than 50 years old. And we came and grew up from being a vocational school where people thought the dumb kids went. Okay? Now, let me tell you about what's going on with the Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology. Most people don't know, down in Shelbyville, our CIT program alone won 5 national awards. We actually tied with Duke University in 2012 with the Computer Laureates, and we beat out MIT in 2013 for innovation on a learning management system. Now, that's the truth. And then on June the 30th of this year, we were invited to go to the White House because we were named one of the top 6 programs in technical education so that we could go to the White House and be recognized. Well, whenever we normally talk, you guys are hearing IT terms, and you're thinking about, or you are thinking about K through 12, which, by the way, it's great that you started because you get most of the education stuff, I have to say, out of the way. But the Tennessee College of Applied Technologies is 27 schools that go across this great state, and it goes across a lot of the counties, and it benefits this entire state. And with that said, it's from Memphis to Knoxville, Chattanooga, and I've visited every one of them. And why do I visit them most of the time? Because of broadband issues and internet issues. And even though, you know, I go to someplace like Knoxville or I go down to Chattanooga or perhaps Memphis, there's always a need for more broadband. And the reason being is the growth of technology. And with that growth of technology, like I think someone said that children are now born with iPads in their hands, that's absolute truth. Most people don't know that Apple-based products are awesome. They go out to a server called push.apple.com. When they do that, it goes out to the iCloud and any other Apple device that's in the area that's owned by that individual. It's going to go out to the to iCloud. It's going to come back perhaps to their MacBook, and this synchronization uses broadband. And what does it do? For every device in a school, I can put this on my firewall, I can look at it through an SNMP trap or what have you, and I can see that each device takes 6 connections out to the internet. So even though we've got a tiny little school, what most people think of 500 people, we've got one of the best things that's happened to this state, and now they're trying to model it nationally, and that's Tennessee Achieves and Tennessee Promise and Tennessee Reconnect. And with that said, our schools are expanding rapidly as people choose a technical education. As they choose a technical education, they've got to look at the broadband connectivity that's available, not just in Shelbyville or Nashville or larger cities, but New Bern and Whiteville and Hartsville and these smaller TCATs that are out there. And then I've actually heard this before where it's like, why do they need so much bandwidth when they're so far away? You know, because all they have is welding or they've got machine tool or what have you. Well, let's talk about the Internet of Things. HVAC, which is heating and air conditioning today, we've got Nest thermometers. If we train somebody about the technical things that go on in HVAC, we've got to have things such as Nest thermometers or anything that's the Internet of Things that connects with HVAC. Those students are bringing in iPads because they're doing labs online, and labs online take a lot of bandwidth. And with that said, even though most of ours, 80% or more, is hands-on, we still have a curriculum we have to follow that involves academia. So we go down to machine tool technology, and when we go down to machine tool technology, we are transferring things that may come out of feature cam to other TCATs so that we can share that data. In a single day, my tiny little school can use 250 gigabyte. That doesn't seem like a lot. But most places like, well, I won't even mention a carrier. They may say, well, your cap is 250 gigabyte. Well, I'm going to eat that up in the first day. And now that we're adding 10 to 20% additional students and we're growing, and like Shelbyville had a main campus. Now we're over at MTech, Middle Tennessee Educational Center. We're down in Fayetteville, and we're in Coffee County, we're in Franklin County, and these are spinoffs of my school, my main campus. With that said, everywhere that I'm connecting, I've got to have broadband, and I need that bandwidth, and we need that growth. And when, whatever has to be done as we go from Memphis to Knoxville, and as we go up in the tiny New Bern all the way down to Chattanooga, we need to work it out. And we need to work it out with the carriers and get rid of the inconsistencies. If it involves tax incentives for these guys to do that for educational K through 12, so we're not worried about how we're going to pay for it or whether it's a tiny little college like us. I heard one time that it costs $3 million to run our TCAT. And then they did a study on it. We returned $27 million back into the community. Not only did we return $27 million back into the community, we also put folks to work. Most people don't know that we as a college, that we are accredited by the Council of Occupational Education. Our feet's held to the fire. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything if I'm tenured, because if I can't get 80% of my students a job, I can actually go on probation. And COE will put me on a monitor status. So I need technology, and I need it in every area in the workforce. Why? Because we put industrial maintenance technicians that run SCADA, that run PLCs, to work at places like Volkswagen and Nissan. When Volkswagen out of Chattanooga calls Shelbyville, Tennessee, 102 miles away or whatever we are, and they say, we want IT people or we want industrial maintenance people, the TCATs make a difference, and we need broadband, and we need the bandwidth. And whatever we've got to do to receive that funding and to work out these differences and to help these communities. We also talk to our students a lot because we're with them 30 hours a week. They're in the same program. Imagine that when you went to college, you saw your professor maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. But you see my face from 7:45 to 2:15 every day, 30 hours a week. So I get to know you, and I get to know the community of my students. And I find out that they are in areas all over Tennessee, and they drive from everywhere. And some have a really good bandwidth, and some have no service at all. So a lot of times when I see these maps, I could actually go up there with a little pen, because I've been doing this for 18 years, and show you where I've got students, and those maps aren't right sometimes. Just to let you know. Just saying.
Thank you, Mr. Mallard, and we're well aware of the Shelbyville TCAT. You were the proud recipients of one of our LEAP grants this year.
We really were, and that made us expand and need more bandwidth.
Yep. Self-fulfilling, isn't it?
But it was awesome. It really was.
We're proud of you. I think it was Senator Tracy who introduced the law, passed the law to change the name to the Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology.
He's always supported us.
Yes, he has.
Across the
questions for Mr. Mallard? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sergeant, are you next? You are recognized. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm here today wearing the THP uniform, but I would like to be considered here today representing all of public safety in the state of Tennessee. And I submit to you that public safety nationwide is behind. We had that discussion earlier with technology and specifically broadband. We live in a digital age, and the people that public safety across this nation serve live in a digital age. And that's been well fleshed out by my predecessors, but also evidenced by the ascent of online music repositories, movie sites that you can download movies, these one-stop shop websites that are putting grocery stores and department stores and hardware stores out of business because you can get 2-day shipping free to your doorstep. Public safety deserves to live in that digital age for the citizens that they serve. We need the same ability to have the Internet of Things at our fingertips so that we can use sites like Wikipedia and things of that nature that our citizenry utilize, but also specific public safety related applications and databases. From your police officer running license plates and criminal history checks from the patrol car, to the firemen being able to download blueprints of a burning building so they're aware of what they're running into. Imagine a world, we'll use a firefighter as an example again, that he has sensors placed in his uniform that monitor his heart rate and his body temperature. Imagine a world where an EMS unit is transporting a patient to the emergency room and they can video conference with the ER doctor and show the injuries straight to the ER doctor. So the ER knows what to expect and can prescribe treatment that is available in the ambulance. Imagine the integration of NG 911 more completely into public safety. Tennessee is a leader in NG 911 deployment, which is basically moving 911 to a broadband-based platform. And we don't have to really imagine that world. It exists. The sky is the limit with public safety broadband. All it takes is imagination and, of course, funding. I've spent the past 2 years of my life working with public safety across the state. In 2013, I was appointed public safety broadband advisor for the state of Tennessee and the state point of contact to the First Responder Network Authority, which is an independent entity under NTIA. And that entity was created by Congress in 2012 to establish a public safety broadband network that will span the nation and be dedicated to public safety. After about 20 years of lobbying Congress, public safety was successful in being allocated dedicated spectrum. We were dedicated 20 megahertz of the 700 megahertz spectrum. And again, I don't want to get too technical for anyone, but 700 megahertz broadband is ideal real estate for a communications network. A lot of people have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this journey over the past 20 years. As I said, this will be a single nationwide network, and it's also the last recommendation of the 9/11 Commission to be implemented by Congress. This is our opportunity as public safety across the nation and in the state to build a dedicated wireless public safety broadband network from the ground up, taking into consideration all of the things that should be involved in a public safety network and not a commercial network. A commercial network, when we're talking wireless broadband, their main priority is coverage and capacity. They want to be able to, coverage and speed. They want to provide those two elements to their customers so that they get the return on investment. In a public safety network, our main priorities need to be coverage and capacity. We need to provide coverage where our first responders respond on a daily basis, but also in those areas that may only happen once a year, a lost hiker stranded on a cliff somewhere. We also have to think about the capacity concerns. We need to have enough bandwidth for the required number of first responders responding to an incident. Could be a large-scale event or a small-scale event. Take the New Madrid earthquake, for example. That's going to be a large-scale response if we have a major event in that area. This network will provide a public safety-grade network, as I mentioned, and some of the components that we're taking into consideration in planning this network that don't exist in the commercial carriers is push-to-talk technology, similar to a handheld radio or the Nextel devices that many of us probably used to use. Group mode, the ability to talk to several people at once. The capacity concerns, hardened sites across the nation that can withstand hurricane-grade winds, tornadoes, things of that nature, earthquakes. Redundant cores, multiple cores across the country that provide a fail-safe for public safety communication. The use of deployables. So in the past 2 years of my travels across the state, we quickly realized, and the commercial carriers are susceptible to this too, there are many places in the state of Tennessee that it is not physically or fiscally possible to build a terrestrial network, putting an antenna hundreds of feet up into the air. So one thing that the FirstNet network, the public safety broadband network, is going to bring to the table are the use of deployables, having deployable devices available to public safety to tow behind a vehicle to a scene, to put in the back of a patrol car that you're with every day, to wear in a backpack so that your park ranger can walk into the forest and search for the missing child and still have connectivity. I'm not necessarily here to sell public safety or to sell the FirstNet network because we don't know what it's going to look like yet. It's still a long ways down the road, but I am here to sell and have been across the state public safety broadband. There's going to be some major decisions that need to be made regarding public safety broadband. The analysts are saying, people much smarter than myself, that by 2020, every citizen in the United States will have 6.5 connected devices. So something has to be done, and I applaud the efforts of this committee to address these concerns at this stage. Thank you.
Mayor Rowland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sergeant, where are your weak links in your communications?
That's a very good question. So, voice communications have been fairly good in this country for 20 to 30 years. What we're talking about here again is primarily a data network. The ability to transmit data, the ability to send the videos of the crime scene to the incident commanders, the ability for a citizen to send photographs and videos to the NG 911 center that can then be relayed to the first responders. So that's our mission with establishing the broadband network, is the ready exchange of data. This the nationwide public safety broadband network will include a voice component, but initially it will not be mission critical voice. We'll still rely on land mobile radio for that, but it will provide the voice component to offload much of the tertiary voice communications that are put on these networks, the land mobile radio networks, that do take up bandwidth, that do cost money. Some of the conversations that can be had on that will be taken offline onto the broadband network.
Is it fair to say that lack of service in some areas destroys your ability statewide?
Yes, sir. Very much so. Again, we've talked about it today, and even with the first panel, the carriers have to build where they're going to make money, and that is not a primary concern of the project that we're involved in today. The primary concern is getting the ability to communicate to the first responders where they need it, which is not necessarily where the population centers are.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Wargo.
Sergeant, would you say that the services that you all use, is it provided mostly by the private networks, or is it sources from all different sources?
Predominantly, it's going to be your commercial carriers. There are some agencies across the nation that have built their own data networks using other spectrum, but this spectrum has been allocated directly to public safety. Most are using commercial carriers that have it. From what we've seen in the state of Tennessee, most public safety, and I'm talking the line officers, the boots on the ground, do not have daily access to broadband or the information that it provides.
Is it a concern of the department for the security of this, that for hackers and things of that other nature?
Yes, and that is being heavily analyzed by research technicians in Boulder, Colorado, on a daily basis. But the better way to think about the security piece is the nationwide public safety broadband network will provide the pipe for the data to go through. The end users, just like today in our facilities and state government education and our personal lives, the end users will have to be trained to be mindful of the security concerns also.
Thank you.
Sergeant, what does this do to the discussion about interoperability? I mean, for so many years, the General Assembly endeavored to provide the funding for interoperable communications. I know that goes to capacity, I guess, and could you comment on that?
Sure. So to your point, the General Assembly allocated the Tennessee Highway Patrol funding to build a statewide land mobile radio system. That build out has been completed as of August, and it is fully operational across the state. This is kind of a supplement to that. And the good thing about this network, it will be built on LTE 4G technology, which provides a base level of interoperability for anyone. So even if a public safety entity from the state of Tennessee goes to South Carolina to help with the flooding incidents, they will be able to take this network with them. They will be able to communicate with entities in South Carolina if they're on the network or not, because 4G LTE provides a baseline of interoperability. If I'm on a FirstNet device, nationwide public safety broadband device, I'll be able to talk to you on your iPhone because it's LTE technology.
No one should be heard to say that we jumped the gun and funded the $50 million interoperability system had we waited and put that money into FirstNet.
No, two different animals. Again, LMR will provide mission-critical voice for decades to come. This is primarily a data network.
Thank you. Other questions for Sergeant? Okay, thank you very much. Mayor, you're up. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah. What I thought was going to be done by about 2 o'clock, boy, was I mistaken on that, right?
Thank you.
That's all right. No, thank you for your time. Learning experience for me there. But I do appreciate the opportunity to come speak on behalf of what I feel as rural counties. Hickman County lies about 45 miles west on I-40 from Nashville. We have 4 exits, 2 of which we actually own property on the other side. The other 2 we kind of split off to Dixon, and we own up to about 3 miles off of that. So we are heavily interested in the Select Tennessee process and looking into what utilities need to be ran out there. And one of the big ones is fiber optics. And we've had several projects. We've just recently gone through a change in our economic community development area, and we relieved the director of their duties. But within that, it's opened up the door to me receiving emails from the state on potential projects. And with those potential projects, we have seen part of their requirements, access to high-speed internet and fiber in particular. Well, we've looked at those, and we've just kind of, for now, marked ourselves off the list. We lose roughly about $100 million in retail sales and fast food to the surrounding counties. We don't have much to offer there. So as far as funding for investment funding for running fiber optics or high-speed capability on the municipal spectrum would be detrimental to our population. We do have several people that are on a fixed income. I mean, that's reality. So today, I would just like to just give you some information about my county and express a concern or a need or a request that you please look into the addition of electric cooperatives, municipal and non-municipal, to be added on to this legislative bill that could be approved, we hope, because we do have a electric cooperative called Meriwether Lewis in our county, and it also provides electricity to 5 other counties: Lewis County, Wayne County, Humphreys County, and Perry County, which I would say 3 of those are on the lower end of, we're tier 3 and probably lower on the job base and economic status. And we're right here in Middle Tennessee, so we need to be looked at a little harder, in my opinion. But if we don't want to go just electric cooperatives, add that, then I'm pushing for complete neutrality. Myself and the other county mayors we don't care who runs it. We don't care who provides us internet. All we want we just want it. We want it. We have a bad need. Centerville, which is our only municipality, which contains about a population of 3,400 people, we do have UVerse, but it's through cable. It is about 18 megabytes per second. We do have what I call a piggyback provider, which is Tennessee Wireless, which rents space from other providers. and their source, it's limited, very, very limited speeds. I, for one, here's an issue that I've got with AT&T is that a mile down the road, I live in Centerville, and a mile down the road, I've got my sister, a mile down the road, she has access to UVerse, okay? Then there's a gap, and this is right almost in the middle of Centerville, okay? Then there's a gap, and then about another half a mile down the road, those folks have capability of accessing UVerse. I don't get it. I don't get it, even though that cable goes right past me. They tell me I can't. I'm not able to get it. So, you ask, well, what about the near future? Are you looking to expand? No, we're not. It's too expensive to run it. We're not going to make enough return in the long run, and that's where we're at in Centerville. The best internet that I've got is I've got a hotspot on my phone. That's how I get internet at my house. I bought my son a PlayStation 4. This is kind of showing my age a little bit, I guess, youthfulness. But I bought my son a PlayStation 4, and so I went home, hooked it up to the Wi-Fi capability, the hotspot. It had a downloadable game, so I'm like, all right, well, it won't take long to download this thing. It took 4 days to download that game. You want to talk about a disappointed son.
He's all grown up by the time he got
I'm telling you. I just sent him on to college, But, that's where we're at. And I'm sure other counties I know other counties are affected by the same situation. We've got an electric cooperative that I've been meeting with that has told us multiple times, we want to run it. We have the capability, we have the money. They can get the money. They want to run it. And state law prohibits it. And that's where we need your help. We need your help in this battle, because I want our families to be closer home for work, for school. They can take college classes online. I did that. It's a need. It's today's utility is what it is. It is today's modern utility, and it's time for everybody to receive it.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Rowland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor, I would ask you what a PlayStation 4 is, but you don't need to explain that to me.
Right.
So you have a provider in Centerville.
Yes.
Do they have a franchise with the city of Centerville or the entire county? How does that work?
No, this. Are you talking about Meriwether Lewis, AT&T? I mean, our provider.
AT&T.
AT&T. Not that I'm aware of. We do not have a franchise with them, no.
Okay, but you have a provider. They're just not giving you the service you need.
Yes.
Not consistent with customers.
That's right.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To add on that, here's some prices that was thrown at me with some of our local businesses that have received fiber. We do know we have fiber running throughout the county as well through AT&T. They call it dark fiber. For some reason, we just kind of jokingly say, well, they just won't flip the switch and run it to everybody. But, for example, off of exit 152, Dixon Bucksnort exit, I've got a company called Accurate Energetics, which owns about 1,200 acres out there, and it's 1.4 miles off the interstate. Well, fiber is ran to the interstate, to the south side of the interstate. He got a quote, the owner got a quote for 1.4 miles of $85,000 to run it 1.4 miles to him. So what is affordable high-speed internet? Hey, I'm all for competition. Competition, all that can do is it will make your speeds increase while your prices drop. Let them fight for it. Let them fight for it in rural counties. Thank you.
Other questions for the mayor? I know everyone's anxious to hear from EVP Radonna Rose, Tennessee Farm Bureau. Last but not least.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, at the end of nearly every rural road in this state, you're going to find a farm. So it's appropriate that the Farm Bureau would be at the end of the day. So, thank you. But I hope that the product that the farmers produce is a product that you all enjoy and one that perhaps many of you have in mind right now of what you're going to eat tonight. So, I will. As y'all probably know, Farm Bureau is a grassroots voluntary organization, membership organization. A large part of the folks that we serve are the portion that's been talked about today that are underserved as far as Internet's concerned and fast-speed Internet. Simply stated, our mission within the Farm Bureau is to build strong and prosperous agriculture and to make rural communities a better place to live. That's our goal. On behalf of our membership, I have 3 points that I want to share with you today, and I brought 3 items along with me to illustrate those 3 points. First is a quarter, and the quarter illustrates a global competitive economy that we all live in, and agriculture is at the heart of that competition. The second, and we've already heard at least 2 speakers on this panel refer to the Internet of Things, which I would tell you is one of the items that you need to have on your definition list of the Internet of Things. But even within the farm community, we have an Internet of Things that's important to us, and one of those is represented by this combine. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, other than to say all of us have smart devices or Internet of Things within our lives. Those combines are the Internet of Things that are the smart devices, the smart farm equipment that's available to our folks today. And then the last one, and I will turn it over for you now, Mayor. The last one I have is an hourglass, because time's important. And time's important in the discussion of Internet in many ways, and I'm going to tell you about some of those here in a minute. Although the gap between the rural and non-rural broadband adoption is narrowing, there are still a lot of holes, and we've seen some of those maps here today to indicate that. We hear many of the same stories that many of you all have talked about today from our members. We hear stories of how service is available right up into my nearest neighbor, but I can't get it. Of how the service is available, but the speed is so slow, it's really of no value to me. Of how the costs are so high, the data caps are so low, or the data has to be used in non-peak hours, which tends to be from midnight until 6 a.m., when they can use the majority of their data. And probably one of the most egregious ones that I've heard a farmer recently talk about is that he has 2 easements across his property for fiber optics, across his farm property, but he can't get high-speed Internet other than through a mobile device. So those are some of the examples that we hear. We've seen the maps, as I said, that show the limited service area. I said the quarter represents the competition that we're dealing with. 95% of the world's population lives outside of the United States of America. And that's where a big part of our customers actually live. We want to keep our farmers competitive, not just with farmers in other states, but competitive with farmers across the world. And 25 cents out of every dollar that comes to a farmer today is a result of those overseas exports that we have. So competition is important, but we need to make sure that our farmers have the appropriate tools to compete, and that's very, very important to us. Tennessee farmers need to be competitive, and yet they face constant pressures with efficiency, with environmental stewardship, with output, and the economic challenges are driving them to a technologically based world, and we've got to make sure that they are able to adapt that technology. In the past, farmers could adapt that technology on their own, but unfortunately today, much of this technology is dependent upon us doing something to make sure that they are able to adapt that technology. I said the combine illustrates one of the many Internet of Things that's available to farmers today. These combines and a lot of the modern day equipment already comes equipped with 2G and 3G capability. And we're hearing in the very near future 4G will be available. Unfortunately, to many of our farmers, they buy the equipment, but they're unable to utilize the technology that's already embedded in the equipment. That technology would allow them to have their equipment remotely sensed to know what's wrong with it, so that before they're down and have to take that equipment in to be worked upon, they can just remotely find out through a diagnostic what's wrong with the equipment. It also allows them to upload variable rate prescriptions for their applications, whether they're seeding or fertilizing, whether they want to get some sort of record as to how much irrigation needs to go on a particular crop. They're able to utilize real-time market and weather data. As I said, the smart tractors, the smart combines already come equipped. This technology has been out there for about 10 years now. We're hearing a lot about driverless cars today. That technology really started at the farm level and has been available at the farm level for several years now, as long as we can get the speeds and the internet capability to the farmers. But with that, and I talked about the environmental pressures, with that technology, farmers are able to apply the exact nutrient needed, at the exact amount needed, and at the optimal time needed. So we've moved from farming a field to being able to farm a square inch of the field with the exact nutrients needed. And that technology's out there. We just need to be able to seize it here in Tennessee and make sure our farmers are able to do it as well. I said that the hourglass illustrates time, and that's important, and probably most of you all are watching the grains fall through that and wondering if I'm going to finish before it finishes, and I will. I promise you, Mr. Chairman, I will. But I want y'all to know that our farmers are not so patiently waiting for the internet broadband to make their way make its way not only to their homes, but to their fields. And let me say that again, to their fields, because all of this equipment is available in the fields today. And the lack of it is putting our folks behind. We've heard comments about the students. Our children are important as well. And I will tell you that to the farmer, when we talk about a child that's in the 5th grade today, and you add 5 years, that in 5 years we'll get it to you, to those children, they're finishing high school then. And that's important to our children to make sure that that technology is available to them before they finish high school. Thank you. And I finished.
You did. Great job by each and every one of you. Thank you very much. Questions, Chairman Wargo.
I'm sure most wish that I would have a time in front of me today. But I feel very passionate. Ms. Rose, could you help me understand one thing? Because in my district, I have one of the largest hog farmers in, I think, the country. And that technology that they have, where they're using their own tractors, it's really astounding. But it's not wired. It's all wireless. Would you say? Would it be fair to say that that's where that we're heading more and more, is wireless rather than the live feed? Because obviously with the moving, I get reports from OnStar about the diagnosis of my vehicle all the time. Nothing's wired, so it's all wirelessly. Is it fair to say that that's that wireless that's driving them combines and them tractors?
And that is an excellent question. And I think what you'll find within the farm community is they kind of want both. They want both, and we heard the discussion earlier about upspeeds. That is extremely important in agriculture because it's wireless out in the field. That data is sent up, And that's where we need the up speeds to be particularly fast in agriculture, because it's sending an incredible amount of data up to the cloud. But then a lot of that comes back down to the farmer in his home base, and that's where many of them want an actually wired technology within their home base, where they're able to take that incredible amount of data and put it together in a usable form. Or many times they'll use outside servers to help put it in a usable form. The machines collect the data, but then it has to be processed to where the farmer can make good use of it.
Another moving part, wireless, fed, etc. Thank you. Great presentation.
Any other questions for Ms. Rose or any of our panelists today? I think we finally wore them out here. Oh, no. Brother McMahon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just feel like, and just to go off what Mayor Rowland was saying a little bit earlier, I feel like I'm a flip phone guy in a Twitter Skype world, and today we've been just taken to church, and I just wanted to thank this panel and the panel we had before us for coming in and explaining exactly where you are and what you need. And Mayor, feel for you, brother. I also want to really thank the previous panel for doing this, but I'm coming away with this three different ways. And one came from an idea that Senator Tracy had when he said we've been talking about this for 15 years. And I've been involved in that conversation for 15 years. And I've taken three things away from it, and I think it's all been vetted out really well, and it allows us to go where we're going to go with this and make some decisions and see what's going to happen. Number one is, in 15 years, technology has just exploded to points that we never saw 15 years ago. Even though we had broadband access and we had internet access 15 years ago, it's just crazy what it's done. Second thing is that 15 years ago, we were still talking to the large providers and asking them to build out in the rural areas, and it hasn't happened. What has happened, though, in turn, is that the local entities, the local stakeholders, the co-ops, and the private sector internet providers have come to the forefront and tried to do something for their communities. That's the second takeaway. The third takeaway for me is that outside of this room, and I would say there's a few in here, including myself, I would say the vast majority of people outside this room don't have a clue to what their actual broadband access is. Whether it's 6 and 1 or 5 and 4 or 28 and nothing or whatever you've got, and I just hate to feel like the flip phone guy in a Skype Twitter world, but I don't think that we have a clue to where we are, and you can't know where you're going until you know where you are. So having said that, I'm really excited. This has been a real church session. I feel like this has been a revival. Revivals go this long, and I think that this has been a revival. And in saying that, I think it's a perfect time. It's the first meaningful conversation I've had and listened to in a long time. And all the things I've done in the last 15 years, it's the first meaningful conversation that I've had. And I really appreciate both panels, and I'm looking forward to what kind of a partnership we can have between TACIR and the study that TACIR is doing, and the study that Commissioner New brought up about that the state is going to undertake with other departments. I think that's a prime opportunity to have a partnership to make it work, so that we can all be educated to a better position to make an educated decision, so we can make suggestions of where to go from here. But I really appreciate you all. I appreciate the previous panel, which I didn't get the chance to say. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
That's a proper motion, Iliff. Non-debatable. Oh, wait, I didn't hear that. No, but thank you all very much. We couldn't have said it better. And as Mayor Rowland said, amen, Brother Iliff, amen. Anything further for the good of the order this afternoon? Hearing none, we'll stand adjourned until 8:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you all very kindly.